Hey guys. Here is part 2 of What If Naruto Woke Up in the Modern World. Hit like and subscribe if you like this one, and also please check the author in the description. Let's start.
We are pain, that's all. We are God.
Chapter 5, When You're Gone. Looking back, he could see that he had made a foolish decision. Many had walked down this same path before him, Hinata, Lee, Neji, but not him. Never him. He turned down each invitation until they no longer asked, until everyone had accepted that holding on to that single shred of hope was blatantly hopeless. No one could bring themselves to come here anymore. After all, this was where Uzumaki Naruto's life had ended. Sasuke's jaw tightened and his sharp eyes flashed. This wasn't like him at all. With the dwindling security and intelligence, his role was considered vital to his comrades' survival. He should be hurrying back to make his report, not detoring to this place, this grave. He should have known better than to give in to his sudden wave of irrationality. His naivety was enough to disgust him. He hadn't realized that he had been one of the many who had fallen prey to the widespread belief that Naruto was indestructible simply because he bounced back from every assault. And here we are, he thought, opening his eyes to glare at the cave that he hadn't returned to since that day. There's nothing. The place of sealing was not unlike the Shikaku's site. Akatsuki knew how to pick locations. Sandwiched between earth and fire countries during a time of tight international tension, not even Sasuke would have blindly charged into grass. It had taken them too long, they had been too late. Since he was not channeling chakra to his feet, each step he took broke out in ripples and disturbed the otherwise pristine, glass-like surface. Sasuke surveyed the dark soil submerged beneath the water, where the King of Hell statue had been summoned. He dully gazed up at the icy spears glistening over his head, his eyes narrowed. It angered the raven-haired man to remind himself that, to this day, Naruto's body was still mysteriously missing. He had never been one to believe in burying the dead for respect of their afterlife. No, he just wanted to put an end to this. There was no closure without the body. It simply kept them hanging. He was upset to realize that he still could not put the ordeal behind him. He should never have let Naruto drag him back to the leaf, even if both of them had beaten the living daylights out of each other, even if the idiot had promised that Konoha had a good lead on Itachi. Even if Sasuke had secretly enjoyed their reunion. Bonds were burdens. He thought he had learned that. He growled lowly. Even this place had a certain aura about it, flooded with Naruto's presence. It was pungent. Unnaturally so. And if there was a single word that all shinobi reacted it would be unnatural. Sasuke's nerves pumped adrenaline into him, and, not quite knowing why, he instinctively masked his chakra signature, falling back to become part of the shadows. His keen eyes glinted in the dark. Small waves skittered along the water surface as the wind abruptly picked up. Sasuke slowly grasped Kuzunagi's brass hilt, prepared to draw, but he was distracted by a sudden hurricane of chakra condensing in the center of the cave. It wasn't the force of the energy that caused him to falter. It was the sheer familiarity of the chakra that stole the breath from his lungs. The unannounced storm died down as quickly as it had arrived. Sasuke spied a figure in its place, lying prone in the trembling waters. At first, he suspected the person was dead, but he was proved wrong when a broad-shouldered man sat up with a startled gasp. That was all he needed. The wind barely stirred as Sasuke's burst of speed took him directly behind his target. He unhesitatingly laid his blade against the man's neck. "Don't move," he said. He frowned at the spikes of blonde hair that peeked through the mud plastered to the strands. His foe reacted with lightning reflexes, very nearly taking Sasuke by surprise. The latter suspected that he would not have emerged from the clash unscathed if the man had actually found whatever weapon he had been groping for. Irked, Sasuke tightened his grip on his blade. "I said don't move." Seeing that his command had reluctantly been abided by, he continued. "Good. Now tell me what you are doing here." It was most likely a scout from Akatsuki. Sasuke couldn't understand why anyone else would pay interest to this place in the middle of nowhere. On the other hand, he had no idea why Akatsuki would send someone down here, but all that mattered was the valuable information that his allies would be able to pull out of this. The man in front of him snorted in annoyance. "First, I want to know what kind of team wants to hack off my head." Sasuke stiffened at the rumbling voice. "I'm getting you back for this, Sasuke team." "Turn around," Sasuke hissed. He felt relatively calm despite the situation. Because he knew that he was suspecting the impossible. It was ridiculous. Because there was no way that. "All right, what do you dash?" That Naruto could still be alive. Sasuke barely heard his name being croaked out. He sprang forward without second thought. The crackling of air charging with electricity was the only thing that warned the other man of encroaching danger. Blue eyes widened with confusion, disbelief, and alarm, and he threw himself out of the way just in time to keep his neck. Sasuke! What are you? It's me! I'm Dash. You're not. His tone was curdled with contempt. Sasuke sheathed his sword and raised his hand. Sparks gathered at his fingertips, and the twitters of 1,000 birds echoed along the walls. You're not him, he said, staring coldly into the disbelieving cerulean eyes as he plunged his Chidori into the impostor's chest. You can't be. He turned slowly, ignoring the shadow clone that he had just destroyed, and eyed the original. His adversary stood on the other end of the cave. Damn you, Sasuke! It's me! He panted. Beads of sweat perspired on his forehead. You are tired out after producing a single shadow clone. You can't be him. It's Dash. For the love of God! I'm Uzumaki Naruto! In a furious flush of motion, shuriken nailed into the rocky wall the figure had been standing in front of only seconds ago. Sasuke looked toward the blonde, standing 5 feet from his original position. No, he frowned. His response drew exasperation. Yes. Your Sharingan can tell. You know it. No. Sasuke forced the single syllable through clenched teeth. What's wrong with you, Sasuke? Why are you acting like Dash? Because you're supposed to be dead. The silence rang loudly between the two men. Sasuke clearly deciphered the shock on his companion's features, and continued to glare as the latter sighed wearily. He slowly slid to the ground, shaking his head. Look, I'm damn near out of chakra and I'm busting to go to the toilet. I don't need a duck like you treating me like a walking ghost. The crimson Sharingan spun. Sasuke refused to believe that this strangely dressed guy was his old teammate. It should be expected of the enemy to attack his weaknesses. But the person standing before him was Naruto in almost every aspect. He was loud, rude, and daring. He could keep up with the Uchiha prodigy and level off the fight without sustaining the smallest of cuts. His chakra signature was unmistakable. Enter my mind with your Sharingan if you want to. The subject continued. Take a look at the QB inside me. I know you can do it. You can't fake something like that, right? Yes, he could do that. It would solve everything. A demon could not be recreated. Go on, Naruto prompted. Nin song, nin machine, Sasuke said softly. Naruto paused, puzzled. Then he slowly grinned. How the hell do you expect me to memorize something that long, bastard? Not many things could catch Uchiha Sasuke off guard. Naruto was proud to be part of the minority. He smirked at the hard disbelief in his old friend's eyes. But he soon frowned as Sasuke's angular features swam in the fog that had unexpectedly waltzed into his mind. Shaking his head turned out to be a mistake. It only made the world spin that much faster. Distantly, he heard Sasuke's voice, flat as always. Yujiro Kantachi. You have a lot of explaining to do. Naruto slowly pulled himself upright, even though some part of him recognized this sudden lightheadedness, and was painstakingly advising him to just stay put. He swayed dangerously until Sasuke stepped in to grab him by the elbow. Naruto shrugged him off after he had righted himself, muttering, "'S all right. I'm good friends with my legs." "Sit back down," Sasuke ordered. For once in his life, Naruto felt like he should listen to his teammate. He didn't feel so peachy anymore. Every second he spent on his legs felt like a strenuous marathon. Please don't tell me I'm going to barf, he thought faintly. But even he knew that was the least of his problems. He hated to admit it, but he was paranoid of getting sucked into that maelstrom of chaos again. He stared hard at his hand, slick with sweat, as if daring it to dematerialize on him. "Will you stop being so stubborn?" Sasuke said tightly. It didn't comfort him in the slightest to realize that he was worried about the loud idiot. He'd hate for their reunion to be short-lived. When he saw that Naruto wasn't listening to him, he scowled and gave him a light shove. "Sit down and catch your breath while I try to make sense of this, dope." Naruto was pretty sure that Sasuke's intentions were good, but there was no denying that his friend had dealt his balance a fatal blow. His waterlogged clothes dragged him down. Sasuke had turned away, brow knitted with thought, and Naruto tried to reach for him. But he was falling. "Humph. You're back," Naruto cursed. What did he have to do to get some peace here? He opened his eyes. "I don't like it either. I hate to break it to you, QB, but your rotten sewer doesn't make the list of attractive tourist destinations." Instead of snapping back, the crimson-furred demon ignored the comment by padding to the forefront of its cell and regarding its jailer with rare interest. "So, you're back. Didn't we just establish that?" Naruto felt like he was missing something when the QB fixed him with a bland look. Suddenly he understood. Well, yeah, looks like it. He swallowed slowly, hesitating. I'm home. He had no idea how it had happened, but he had somehow returned to his own era. The reality was that he had been testing his recovered chakra, triggered some sort of reaction, and had woken to Sasuke trying to kill him. It didn't make any sense. He was tentative, and for reasons he didn't understand, he just couldn't readily accept that he had been transported home that easily. With no mistake, he was definitely glad to be back. This was where he belonged, after all. But still, it felt so minor compared to waking up in the future. It was like waking from a dream. Maybe it'd be easier if it was a dream, Naruto thought pensively. He looked down at his hands. They were trembling ever so slightly. He clenched them tightly. No, not a dream. He didn't want to believe that everything up to this point had been nothing more than a figment of his imagination. Sakura and her father couldn't have been a dream. They had been kind to him, had liked him, and he had liked them. He wouldn't let them be a dream. I don't understand what goes on in a human's pea of a brain, the Kyuubi snorted. I thought you would be happy about this. Naruto looked up. He'd figured out what he was missing, joy. Don't be ridiculous. He scoffed, to both the demon and himself. Why wouldn't I be happy? Get yourself some glasses before you try reading people, Fox. In any case, I hope you know what happened. He internally shirked away from the Kyuubi's semi-curious look and concentrated on its deep voice. Unlike you, I do have some inkling of how this came to be. I am still thinking. We just went through time again, didn't we? How? Naruto remembered that his Rasengan had turned violently red with the Kyuubi's chakra, and narrowed his eyes. That wasn't you trying to break the rest of the seal, was it? He asked suspiciously. Fool! You were the one drawing on my chakra. Do not force the blame on me. The Kyuubi responded roughly. Large slitted pupils glanced upward. If you must know, time has run out for explanations. You simply succumbed to chakra exhaustion. Your body is waking. It glared vehemently as if to remind Naruto that the depleted chakra was entirely his fault, before turning its back on him. Learn to draw your own conclusions. Do not disturb me. Naruto stiffened as he was cast out of his own mind. Shafts of light beamed through the black as he rose toward consciousness. He gazed thoughtlessly at the radiance until he was engulfed by white. He had expected his bedside to be crowded, but the room was empty. Naruto sat up, taking in his surroundings. He surprised himself by thinking of the Haruno's spacious study when he saw that the room was unfamiliar to him. The wind howled outside, unnaturally strong for Konoha's weather. Naruto obsessively smoothed the starchy blanket against his leg for several minutes. His mind was so muddled with confusion. He had been forced to switch gears too quickly. One moment he had been in a world he was only just beginning to adjust to, and the next he was back where it all started. How did this work? Footsteps echoed down the hallway beyond the closed door of his room. Naruto habitually vaulted out of bed and tried to act like he hadn't only just woken up. By the time he crestfallenly remembered that Sakura would not be shaking him awake anymore, the door had soundlessly opened and a woman stepped inside, blinking in confusion at the empty bed. It took longer than it should for Naruto to recognize his visitor. He had been slow to adjust to the jounin attire that she had switched to wearing when the war had hit its peak, but now he wasn't accustomed to seeing her without it. The fact that he was waking up to someone he actually knew floored him enough to leave him speechless until a slight shuffle of his feet gave him away. He winced when the newcomer whipped around with the speed of a well-tuned shinobi. The rapid movements itched his trained reflexes to lash out. The two of them stared at each other for so long that even Naruto felt awkward about it. But what was he supposed to say? Judging from Sasuke's reaction, everyone thought he was dead. He thought he had been prepared, but he wasn't. Although it hadn't been very long since he'd last seen them, he couldn't help but feel like he had been separated from his companions for years. Their lives had gone on without him, and now, returning as the living dead, he felt awfully detached. So all Naruto could do was stare uncomfortably into the wide, incredulous eyes that were trained on him. But he couldn't hold the silence for any longer when those eyes began to water with tears. Don't cry, Shizune, he blurted desperately. Unfortunately, the sound of his voice only sent a fresh wave of tears flowing down her cheeks. Naruto staggered back as his surrogate sister threw her arms around him. It really is you, she whispered. Naruto. Naruto, you're back. I can't. She buried her tear-streaked face in his chest. Naruto found himself wrapping his arms around Shizune's shoulders, struggling to find the right words. Finally, he croaked. Tadaima. Shizune choked on short laughter and pulled away a little, gazing up at his face. I can't believe you were alive all this time. She wiped her face. What happened to you? We heard that Akatsuki had. Long story. She must have seen his grimace. You can save it for later, when everyone is here. Shizune's eyes lit up. We should let them know you're awake. I had to ask the Kazekage to put in restrictions while you were unconscious. Everyone wanted to see you. Naruto tilted his head. Kankuro? He's here? You haven't realized yet? Shizune wouldn't let go of him. We're in Suna, Naruto. Suna? He turned to the window. The gritty wind and sparse, rounded buildings told him that they were indeed in the sand village. To be honest, he had never appreciated the place very much, finding the environment harsh compared to Konoha's. Naruto was disappointed. He assumed that Sasuke had opted to travel to the nearest village. But he'd wanted to go home to his birthplace. He wanted to see the Leaf Village. No, when can we go back to Konoha? Naruto asked hopefully. Even as he voiced the question, he wondered why Shizune was here. She was not so irresponsible as to leave their village when the hospital was so short on staff. She also wore Wine Country's customary garments, designed to shield the wearer from the sandy weather, as if she had been staying in the village for a long period of time. Naruto looked down at his own body, and smiled. He was still in the clothes Sakura had bought for him. Konoha. Shizune sounded dismayed. He watched her curiously, confused by her expression. Naruto, you don't know? Know what? Naruto became anxious when Shizune didn't answer him right away. Something had happened to the village. Shizune, tell me, he said in a voice louder than he had intended. She couldn't even look at him now. He felt cold. Akatsuki attacked, didn't they? Didn't they? Shizune! Breaking, Shizune slipped out of the grip he had on her shoulders. Naruto didn't even remember grabbing her. His knuckles were pale and he registered that he must have been hurting her. Immediately ashamed, he turned his head away and forcefully slowed his breathing. The Kyuubi reacted even more readily to his emotions now. If he wasn't careful, he would release the demon. He had promised never to let that happen, and it was one promise he was determined to keep. Shizune held his rigid hands down. She had seen the young man's pupils narrow to menacing slits, and was disturbed by what she had seen. Naruto hadn't lost control of the Kyuubi in the face of an ally for years. Swallowing, she said, Naruto, please get a hold of yourself. Listen to me. His eyes were closed. I'm listening, he breathed heavily. But Shizune wasn't the one who spoke next. Am I interrupting something? The new voice was deep and masculine. Naruto looked over the top of Shizune's head, his eyes widening. Kankuro! Good to see you too, Squirt, the older man greeted. Naruto still remembered the Kankuro of the past, face painted, many inches shorter, and with his earliest puppet strapped to his back. Over the years, Kankuro had developed into a tall, powerfully built figure of authority. He had stopped wearing face paint a short while before he had taken over his brother's role as Kazekage, instantly transforming his appearance. Despite their long acquaintance, Naruto still had trouble recognizing his friend from a distance. Now, Naruto squinted at Gaara's brother, curious despite his unease. Since when did you have a beard? He asked. Kankuro's eye twitched. It's a goatee, for heaven's sake. There's a difference. And for your information, I started growing it out last year. Last year? No way. I haven't seen you with a beard before today. Kankuro would undoubtedly have launched into an irritated explanation of the difference between a beard and a goatee if Shizune hadn't interrupted before he could begin. Naruto doesn't know, Kazekage. The large man stopped fingering his facial hair, suddenly serious. Naruto grew tense again just looking at his grim expression. What's going on? He demanded. More like what's already happened, Kankuro muttered. Naruto, it's probably best if you tell us your side of the story first. What happened to you? Naruto was frustrated at having his own question turned against him. Why wouldn't anyone tell him anything? It could only be a sign that the news was bad, very bad. Impatiently, he retold his experience. He fed his audience the Kyuubi's explanation of what had happened, but faltered when he came to the Harunos. He avoided mentioning them as much as he could. His time with Kazuo and Sakura was not important to his audience, but it meant more to him. They wouldn't understand. The selfish part of him didn't want to tell his friends, the ones who had been by his side for years, that he had been happy in a world without them. My chakra went wild and did, well, I don't know what it did. All I know is that I woke up in that cave and Sasuke found me there. And now I'm here, wondering why no one's telling me what I want to know. Naruto knew that his anger was unwarranted. But he needed to know. Didn't they see that? Kankuro looked deep in thought, his mind quickly breaking down Naruto's tale. Well, I know that there are rumors of forbidden techniques that can allow the user to manipulate time, so I can believe what the Nine-Tails did. But a month, you say? Yes, I'm pretty sure I was there for no longer than a month. Will you please tell me what happened to Konoha now? His expression troubled. Kankuro scratched his head. You're the medic Nin, Shizune. Do you think it's healthy for him to know right after he's just woken up? I'm perfectly fine, Naruto insisted, but he recognized an attempt to stall when he saw one. He had to be incredibly dense if he hadn't caught on to this evasive tactic, and why it was being used on him. As the captain of several assault squads, he'd had the disheartening task of breaking bad news to families. He just wanted someone to tell him the truth. More than anything, he wanted to prove his intuition wrong. Are you going to come inside anytime soon, Sasuke? He called. Kankuro stepped aside to let Sasuke walk into the room. The Uchiha leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. His eyes were intense. Sasuke, did Akatsuki dash? There's nothing left of the Leaf Village, Sasuke said quietly. Nothing left? Naruto repeated after a moment of silence. Shizune gave Sasuke a look of warning, but the words were stolen from the Uchiha's lips by Naruto himself. We lost, didn't we? Kankuro stepped forward. Hey, don't think like that. It's not over yet. The other nations dash. We lost, Naruto said again, his tone dull and detached. He slowly lowered himself onto the bed and held his head in his hands. He felt like he was trapped in a void. He didn't quite see Shizune kneeling in front of him, concerned. He couldn't hear her voice. He couldn't feel anything. Konoha is gone. He forced himself to swallow. Where's Jiraiya? I want to talk to him. Never before had Naruto felt such a strong need for Jiraiya's guidance. The pervert wouldn't mince his words, nor would he needlessly try to comfort his apprentice. Jiraiya always knew what to do, and Naruto desperately needed someone to give him a purpose to cling to right now. The silence hung, unpenetrated. Naruto looked around at his companions, waiting for a response. Shizune bit her lip and looked out the window. She wouldn't meet his eyes. No one would. After a while, Naruto lowered his head again, chuckling weakly. So that's how it is, he murmured. He stared at his hands. He had fought so many battles with these hands, but now he felt like he had nothing to fight for. I just don't understand, he whispered. How could all of this have happened while I was gone? I don't get it. Sasuke closed his eyes for a brief moment. That's because you've been gone for nearly 4 years, Naruto. The end of the school day couldn't come quickly enough for Hirano Sakura. Her gaze strayed to the clock too many times, and she eventually began wishing that the sluggish minute hand would move as quickly as she was twirling her pen. But when the bell finally rang and her teacher futilely reminded the class of their homework, Sakura found herself still in her seat and blinking at the logarithms on the blackboard as her classmates fled from the room. Then, sighing, she got up and began to pack her bag. I did it again, she thought unhappily. For the past few days, Sakura had been restless, especially during school hours. Sitting through her classes became tedious, and she would come to school only to look forward to going home again. Yet the moment the bell rang, she would lose the rush of haste and wonder why she had been so eager for the day to end. She didn't know what had gone over her. The thing about schools was that they emptied incredibly quickly. Students without after-school activities beelined for the exits, as if terrified that staying on the school grounds would cause them to break out in nasty hives. Sakura had gotten used to the empty hallways lately, so used to them, in fact, that she didn't even bother to pay attention to her surroundings. The other student grunted as she walked right into him, coming close to stepping on his sneakers. Sakura's apologies were cut short when she accidentally dropped and tripped over her own bag. She would have hit the floor if someone hadn't caught her by the wrist. Great. So this is what I get for stopping to say hi, the boy grumbled. Sakura stopped short when she recognized the voice. Her lips thinned into a habitual smile as she looked up at the familiar face. Oh, it's you. She massaged her forehead, her expression becoming one of playful ridicule. Have you been eating scrap metal for breakfast again? Yamazaki Kenjiro grinned, rubbing his chest. Yeah, I can see you've been practicing your headbutts on hammerheads too. I hate you, Ken. I love you too, he teased back. Sakura was glad that Ken had chosen that moment to bend over and retrieve her bag. Those 4 words had once melted her, but Sakura was a natural realist. She quickly schooled her expression into a passive one just as Ken straightened and handed her bag to her. She smiled at him, hoping he wouldn't notice her stiff spine and the clenched hand she held behind her back. You don't have your gear, Ken observed. Not coming to training today? Can't. She showed him her left hand bound by bandages. Dad said I should take it easy for a couple of weeks. So that's no tennis for a while. Sorry. He grimaced at her injury. Well, that does look painful. What did you do to it? Sakura's eyes glazed as she touched the dressing. My woodwork assignment, and I had a little disagreement. Looks like you should have listened to Ino and chosen hospitality after all. The amusement gradually drained from his eyes. So, I heard that a friend of yours has gone missing, Sakura. She stared at him for a while. You could say that, she mumbled. You've been distracted all week. Close friend? Sakura turned her head toward the window, her eyes downcast. Probably. Probably? Ken raised an eyebrow. I didn't know him very well. She raised her wounded hand and rested it on the windowsill. She frowned at the plaster around her finger, remembering Naruto's strange, silent phases. I don't even know anything about him, she said softly. She shook her head and smiled wanly at Ken. Gomen Eni. You didn't need to hear that. You have training, don't you? You'd better get going. You know what Kimura-senpai does to people who are late. Oh, trust me, I know exactly what he does. Ken slung his sports bag over one shoulder and looked down at the pink-haired girl. About your friend. I can, have a talk with my uncle and see what he can do. If you want. It's alright, Ken. He's old enough to be independent, and I doubt he got kidnapped. There's no point bothering the police. He shrugged. Alright then. If you need anything, you can call me, right? Their eyes met and Sakura was thrown back by his deep gaze, flickering with emotions that made her turn away. Right. She heard herself reply. Ken smiled at her one last time. Then they both turned and went their own ways. Sakura's fast-paced walk carried her out into the courtyard, and then the energy left her. She wished she hadn't run into Ken, alone. She dragged her fingers through her hair, chewing on her lower lip. She hated this. Ever since then, it felt like the two of them were more than regular friends, yet at the same time there was an unexplainable distance between them. It made her feel uncomfortable. She didn't even know where their friendship stood anymore. Despite herself, Sakura wistfully looked over to the far wall outside the school gates. The memory of a blonde-haired boy enthusiastically scribbling in a notepad flashed into her mind, and she forced herself to look away. Gee, what took you so long, Sakura? The sound of her name spun her around faster than she thought possible, and she stared back at the unoccupied wall until she forcefully reminded that he wasn't going to come. I love how I don't even get a thanks for waiting. Ino sighed at her friend's silence. Her eyes softened. Expecting someone else? Sakura's eyes flashed, and she gave Ino an accusing look. You told Ken about Naruto. Ino peered down the road. Dang, we missed the bus. She sighed, and began walking. Ino, Sakura sighed. He noticed that you've been acting weirdly, so he asked me if I knew what was wrong. It wasn't like I had much to tell him, you barely told me anything. Ino glanced over at her companion. Sakura had been unusually enigmatic about Uzumaki Naruto's disappearance. Ino hadn't even known that Loverba had mysteriously gone missing until Sakura had been walking home alone for 3 days. There's nothing to tell, Ino. He's gone. And what? Getting straight answers out of Sakura when she didn't feel like it was a monstrous task. Ino had known Sakura for years, so she knew that the girl had the tendency to hide her problems. She hardly ever talked to anyone about them. Her private mind impressed the adults, but Ino personally disliked her friend's quiet character. It never failed to give the impression that Sakura was facing troubles beyond her age. Come on, he's been living with you for weeks, and all of a sudden he's disappeared. You've been pretty upset about it. I hope you're not about to deny it, she said sternly when Sakura opened her mouth. Ever since you met him, you've always found a way to mention his name in conversations. You bothered to get up early and walk him to my place. He's been gone almost a week, and in that time you've been a brick wall. Thanks, Sakura huffed. Ino ignored her. My point is, you're closer to him than you think. They stood waiting at the next crossing. Sakura distantly watched the red light glow. She walked down the same path with Naruto every day. Most of the time they laughed and exchanged highlights of their day. He would go on about working at the flower shop and she would obligingly answer his curious questions about her courses. Sometimes their trip home would be quiet. On those days, Naruto was usually deep in thought, frowning at something he never talked about. After the harbor, Sakura had learned to respect his silence and not take his demeanor too seriously, because at the end of the day, Naruto would always look up with a bright grin, reliably cheerful and overly active. She began to wonder if she knew more about Uzumaki Naruto than she thought. Forehead, Ino sighed. Would you talk to me? Please? Sakura didn't speak until they had crossed the road. Ino, I'll be alright. He's my friend, but in the end he's just someone my dad brought home and let stay over. He was going to leave sooner or later. This was just a little sudden, that's all. Nothing really changed. And she closed her eyes, willing herself to say the words. It's reality, she told herself. Deal with it. And someday, I'll forget him. That's how life is. Sakura, you. Ino frowned, and suddenly she couldn't hold back anymore. Sure, you didn't know him too well and he wasn't related to you, but I could tell you liked him. Well, not liked him. She shook her head, dismissing the minor details. You liked having him around, didn't you? Naruto was, oh, what am I saying? Is a nice guy. You two were living in the same house. Even I know he's not just some random stranger to you. You're not worried about him? You don't dash. Care? Sakura interjected quietly. They had stopped at the intersection that parted their way home. She laughed humorlessly and met Ino's wide eyes. Trying hard to keep her voice level, she said, What else can I do about it, Ino? If I'm not supposed to forget him, what am I supposed to do? The two girls stood facing each other, not uttering a word. Ino bit her lip, her frown deep, wondering if she had taken it too far. Then Sakura's head came up, and she was smiling. It didn't look forced, but her childhood friend knew that she'd had a lot of practice. Mao, you're being so serious, pig, loosen up. Don't worry about me. Like I said, I'll. Her voice trailed off. She couldn't say it this time. I'll be fine. I promise I'll cheer up soon, Kay? Sakura, that's not what I dash. Ino didn't get to finish. The weatherman said it might rain this afternoon. We should get home before it does, huh? Sakura smiled tightly. She truly appreciated Ino's concern, but Naruto had become a peculiarly touchy subject for the pink-haired girl. She implored her friend to drop it. At last, Ino gave in with a defeated sigh. See you tomorrow, billboard brow. Don't say I didn't try. It wasn't until the blonde had turned the corner that Sakura murmured, Of course I care. The clouds began to shed light rain almost as soon as she started walking again. Sakura immediately fumbled through her satchel. Her umbrella was buried deep in her bag and her hair was already damp by the time she unearthed it. But hesitating, she didn't open it. Ano-sa, where can I buy an umbrella? Lots of places. I'll show you on the weekend if you want. Great! Do you think they'll have frog patterns on them? I think you might have to raid a preschool for those. What's wrong with mine, anyway? Well, it's pink. Your point? The memory only made her tighten her grip on the umbrella's handle, eyes dark. Recalling that Naruto had used the same umbrella was enough to make want to stamp her foot in frustration. Why did it feel like she had undergone a life-changing event when nothing had really happened to her? Why did Naruto's disappearance haunt her so much when it shouldn't affect her more than a classmate changing schools? That's enough, cut it out already, she whispered. The cold was beginning to seep through her shirt, climbing up her skin. She knew she should open her umbrella. She wasn't stupid enough to stand unsheltered in the rain, unlike. Damn it! She shoved her umbrella back in her bag, and ran. She had always been a fast sprinter. But even the rhythmic beat of her shoes pounding against concrete and her labored breaths could not completely drown out, what? The anxiety? Anger? Regret? She kept running. Some part of her registered her father's car in the driveway, and Sakura slowed on the steps, catching her breath. Winded, she parted sodden hair away from her face. She realized that she was soaked more thoroughly than she had thought, and sighed at the thought of having to lie. She didn't fancy telling her parent the truth. She didn't doubt that Naruto was on the forefront of his mind as much as it was on hers. He shouldn't have to worry about her as well. After taking a deep breath, Sakura let herself into the house. Kazuo was sitting on the couch. He looked up from his laptop when his daughter shut the door. You're home early again, Dad? I hope you remembered to take the clothes in. It's raining outside. I can tell. He chuckled. Sakura laughed a little. Yeah, I sort of dash. Forgot your umbrella? He finished for her. His daughter's smile faded into a grimace, but he didn't press her. Instead, he nodded at a steaming mug on the coffee table. Come have a sip and warm yourself up. Relieved, Sakura kicked off her shoes and joined him. Her moist uniform clung to her as she sat down. She gratefully wrapped her hands around her father's cup. She knew it was mocha with extra milk and less sugar before she even tasted the dark liquid. Instantly, a thread of warmth lazily circulated through her body and filled her with ease. She looked curiously at Kazuo's laptop screen. What are you working on? The director wants the monthly report. He sighed and stabbed at the backspace key. This keyboard is too small, he grumbled. Why didn't you use the desktop in the study? Kazuo hit backspace a few more times. Some people have a very confusing system of organizing things. It's called the mess. And the moment someone shifts stuff around, they can't find anything anymore. He studied a printed profile on the table. I figured the kid would probably like his mess the way it is. Hearing his words, Sakura looked down at her lap and gently swirled the cup's contents. You sound so certain that he'll come back. I don't know where that boy's gone, but I think he'll be back. Someone like him. Her father paused. I think he would say goodbye if he was really leaving. There it was again. Not just Ino, but her father also seemed to see something different in Uzumaki Naruto. Just as Sakura had. She didn't know how, but from the moment she had seen him outside the school gates, waiting for her on the word of a promise, she'd known that Naruto was more than a friendly stranger. Something about him stood out. That was why Sakura could not simply dismiss what had happened. Any sensible person would have dwelled on it and moved on. But for once, Haruno Sakura was not being sensible. Dad? She slowly placed the cup onto the coffee table. Do you think Naruto left? Kazuo glanced at his daughter. By that you mean? Like left of his own accord. Sakura slowly chose her words. I wonder if, maybe, he didn't want to stay anymore. Kazuo thought he sensed a tinge of desperation, as if Sakura did not want to imagine any other reason Naruto would have disappeared. Why don't you ask yourself something? He suggested lightly. She gazed expectantly up at him. Do you think he wanted to leave? Me? She blinked and in her mind's eye, she pictured Naruto's lively grin. Her lips unconsciously curved into a fond smile. I thought he was happy staying with us. There you have it. He'll be back. Have some faith in him. Kazuo affectionately ruffled her damp hair. Take a shower, Sakura. I'll make dinner tonight. And now. He shot his report an unhappy look. Sakura watched him for a while, enjoying the security her father's presence instilled. It must be nice to be so confident, so composed. Despite that, she was glad she hadn't told Kazuo about the eruption of sheer energy that had occurred in her room. She hadn't told anyone about it. She doubted she was going to. She made her way upstairs, leaving her father to his work. A dull ache prickled Sakura's hand as she entered her bedroom. Almost a week ago, she had burst into her room to find it in chaos, and Naruto nowhere to be seen. Instinctively deducing that no one should know about the incident, she had tidied the mess before her father returned, and when he did, told him that she had come out of her shower to find Naruto gone. It wasn't that she thought Kazuo wouldn't believe her, she kept it to herself because she knew this wasn't normal, because the idea that Naruto may not be normal was one that could easily spread like wildfire. The atmosphere in the room was still heavy with residue of the supernatural power. As usual, it made Sakura extremely uneasy. She turned to the center of the room. Something had definitely happened here, but what? Her mind supplied a ghostly image of Naruto wrestling with the wooden block, tongue protruding from his mouth in a sign of intense concentration. Her father was right. Naruto wouldn't simply leave like that, especially not through the window, which was the only possible exit since Sakura had not seen him downstairs. But if he didn't leave? This was what she hated the most, the reality of not knowing what happened, of being left to formulate her own conclusion. She had no experience with things like this, and she refused to believe in something as outrageous as alien abduction. The mysterious emotion returned to her chest, chilling her more than wet clothes could. She tried to suppress it, but it only grew stronger as she slid to the floor and hugged her knees. Naruto, please come back. She was afraid because, deep down, she knew exactly what was bothering her. The thought horrified her. If she could just see him, smiling that goofy smile, then she could brush off the fear. Sakura squeezed her eyes shut. The fear that Naruto was dead. He didn't move until many hours later. Night had fallen and the room was illuminated only by the weak glow of the village's meager nightlife. Sitting with his eyes closed, Naruto could easily forget that he was in Suna. To him, the sound of quiet activity was Konoha's villagers braving through fear and gloom to keep the streets lively. The grainy spatter of sand against stone was wind whistling through the leaves of the tree outside his bedroom window. The faint chatter of voices were his friends trudging home, half the group drunk, the sober half fending off an intoxicated Rock Lee. Then he slipped back in time and was sitting on the floor of his old classroom, immobilized by ropes and suffering Irika-sensei's endless threats of what he would do if his feisty student dared to skip class again. Naruto looked over the heads of his laughing classmates, and saw that the back of the room had become the Hokage's office. Sarutobi was playing shogi with Jiraiya, while Tsunade discreetly stole the winner's bottle of sake. Everyone was here. This was home. But when he opened his eyes, it was all gone. A dull thud resonated off the walls as Naruto abruptly slammed the ridge of his palm against his forehead. This wasn't how it was supposed to be, The Leaf Village had been destroyed, Jiraiya was dead, his friends had lived 4 years without him. Was this what he had been yearning for all this time? The world he had longed to return to, was this? Now would be a great time to wake up, he thought darkly. However, not even the intense frustration he was experiencing could dull his honed senses. His eyes darted to the door before it even opened. Sasuke silently strode inside. Half the village wants to see you, and here you are, getting drunk on grief. What do you want, Sasuke? Come, Dobe. We're going for a walk. The hunched figure on the bed did not move. Sasuke crossed the room and grabbed Naruto by the arm. Almost immediately his hand was knocked away. Naruto had risen to his feet, his chest heaving. It took him a brief moment to realize what he was doing, and he tried to soften the glare in his eyes. Go by yourself? I need more time alone, he muttered. Get over it, Sasuke said bluntly. Get over it, Naruto echoed. He laughed a hollow laugh. Who are you trying to kid, Sasuke? You don't get it. Do you know how hard I fought for our village? Do you know what it means to me? His voice rose uncontrollably. Do you know how important Erosenin was to me? Do you know how goddamn useless I feel right now? He pounded his fist against the wall, and thin cracks raced along the plaster. Onyx's eyes narrowed. Listen to yourself. The way you are right now, you are useless. Stop thinking about what has already happened. Set your priorities straight. Priorities? What priorities? Naruto furiously shook his head. There's nothing left to fight for. Cool-headed as he was, Sasuke could not stand the pathetic sight that was supposed to be the most optimistic being alive. There was a limit to sorrow, and he never thought he would hear those words from Naruto, of all people. In a flash, he had grabbed the other man by the shirt and slammed him against the wall. Get a grip, Naruto! He hissed. Are you just going to let Akatsuki have their way? Get it into your thick skull that it isn't the end. Konoha is gone. Accept it. You aren't the only one who dash. Naruto ripped himself free. What do you know? He snapped. You left the village. You never truly cared about it, did you? How would you understand how I feel? He knew he had crossed the line, and the lucid side of him regretted it when he saw Sasuke's unreadable expression. Naruto tried to calm himself in the lapse of silence, still watching Sasuke. He had no idea what the latter was thinking. Eventually Sasuke spoke. You're right. I don't care about Konoha as much as you do. I was prepared to sever all ties with it. But do you know why I'm still here? His sharp eyes pierced Naruto's with unnerving credence. Because some idiot dragged me back and told me that I belonged there. I don't. But why do I fight for it? He clenched his fist. Because the easiest way to live is to have something to fight for, that's why. And don't think I forgot who told me that. He saw it coming but was too stunned to evade it. Naruto stood there and let Sasuke's fist smash into his jaw. His head snapped to the side and he was flung back against the wall, the impact shaking the window. He staggered and lost his balance. Sasuke slowly straightened. Nothing left to fight for. If you are really Uzumaki Naruto, act like it. Wordlessly, Naruto wiped a trickle of blood from his chin. Do you think I like to lose, idiot? I know it's hard for you. It was hard for everyone. The fight isn't over. The village can be rebuilt. But you can't bring back Jiraiya. Naruto's voice cracked at the mention of the Toad Sannin. According to Kankuro, Jiraiya and the rest of the infiltration squad had met their end on the same day Naruto had been defeated by Pain. The Akatsuki leader had joined his subordinates after capturing the Nine-Tails host and overwhelmed the Leaf Nines. Jiraiya had dealt their enemies remarkable damage before falling. Naruto was somewhat glad that his mentor hadn't known that his apprentice had been captured. He didn't want to forever be a failure in the eyes of the man who had come closest to being his father. A shadow fell over him and Naruto flinched when Sasuke hauled him to his feet. Come on, he muttered. Where are we going? Naruto asked, but received no reply. Faced with no other option, the blonde dazedly stumbled in his friend's wake. The bright lights in the corridor momentarily blinded him, and he barely evaded certain death when he followed Sasuke down the staircase. He realized that he had been staying at the village's administration center when they entered the lobby. The place seemed much busier than he remembered, even at the late hour. That's Shikamaru! I'm not a flapping carrier pigeon! A slender woman burst through the front doors, shaking a crumpled envelope. She slapped it down on the receptionist's cluttered desk. Send this up to Kankuro. Tell him it's from Naruto Shikamaru. She paused for a moment. And tell him I've saved some dinner for him. She huffed and marched out again, muttering something along the lines of, Men! Seriously! Naruto stared after the blonde woman. That was Temari, wasn't it? So she and Shikamaru are still together, huh? Sasuke hadn't even looked at the scene, but he glanced sideways at his companion. Shikamaru can no longer use his legs. You're kidding. No. They left the building, emerging in the dusty streets. Naruto trudged after Sasuke, his brow puckered. Shikamaru, the lazy yet terrifyingly brilliant man who could lay a siege with only a dozen men, was crippled. It didn't seem fair. Why do these things happen? Naruto had once demanded of Jiraiya when they had discovered a smoking battlefield on their travels. He choked on the stench of death then, young and naive, blind to what a true shinobi's life was like. Because this isn't just war, Gaki, Jiraiya had said, his eyes serious for once. This is life. Thinking back, Naruto could understand why Sasuke had hit him back there. It was too easy to forget that he had been gone for so many years. His friends had suffered through warfare and hardship for twice as long as he had. They had also lost their home and loved ones. It was selfish of him to act like the sole victim. Although, life seemed normal enough. They had settled despite the constant fighting. It appeared to Naruto that people like Shikamaru and Temari were making the most out of their lives while they could. They were prepared. They had hardened. They had moved on. And he was expected to do the same. Naruto's mind buzzed with thoughts that were beginning to give him a headache. He pulled himself out of his reverie and caught up to Sasuke, who had gone on ahead while he had loitered. The latter seemed determined to remain silent. Naruto observed that Sasuke was even quieter than he had once been. He also strode through Suna's streets with the ease and familiarity of long-term residents. Strangely, it made Naruto feel awkward. As they walked on, he began to notice the number of heads that turned when he passed by. He recognized some faces, and gradually came to understand that not all of Konoha was gone. He waved and shouted greetings to those that smiled at him, and thought he felt a spark of hope ignite within him. The sand village seemed to have expanded to accommodate the former Leaf residents. Amongst the clay buildings were small clusters of small wooden houses. Naruto could only imagine that Tenzu was responsible. He really had missed out on so much. While he had been working at a flower shop and getting ready to leave everything behind him, his comrades had done all this. He kicked at the dirt beneath his shoes. Sasuke stopped, but Naruto didn't look up in time and plowed right into his back. His lack of attention earned him a sharp look of annoyance. We're here. Naruto spared his teammate a glower and, brushing himself off, stepped out from behind Sasuke. His eyes widened. The stand was smaller than it used to be and the decor was decidedly foreign, but the store's nameplate was one and the same. The nostalgic fragrance was not at all dulled by the sand in the wind. Odd, he turned to Sasuke. Maybe he was trying to tell him that some things were still the same. Like Ichiraku ramen. Naruto eagerly swept aside the gray veil draped over the store's front that was designed to keep sand out. The seats were empty and the counter was unmanned, but he could hear activity in the kitchen. Old man Tucci! I am! He called, making no effort to disguise his rising excitement. Sasuke seated himself. Quiet down, he retorted, knowing that his words would enter one ear and out the other. The idiot was too enthusiastic to be shot down with 2 words. It was the first genuine smile he had seen on Naruto's face for a long time. Naruto leaned across the counter and continued calling, until the 2 shinobi heard the telltale metallic clang of a pan being dropped, followed by hasty footsteps. A flustered woman emerged from the back of the store, shoving long brown hair from her face so she could see her customer properly. Naruto! I gaped at him, dropping the towel she had been holding. She touched his hand, pinched his cheeks, convincing herself that he was real. The rumors were true, she said in disbelief. You're alive! Course I am. What did you expect? He grimaced as soon as he asked the question. Baka! He berated himself, seeing through Iam's feeble smile. He sheepishly rubbed the back of his head and searched for a change of topic. So where's your dad? He asked Iam. He's not here, she told him. Naruto felt his heart sink. Don't tell me. Yes, he retired. You'll have to put up with my cooking, isn't that horrible? She laughed. He exhaled the breath he didn't realize he had been holding, wishing away the residue dread that had washed over him only a moment ago. Don't scare me like that, Iam. He tried to say it jokingly. Iam's reaction didn't give him the impression that he had managed the expression properly. She blinked at him, then seemed to come to a sudden realization. Oh, Naruto! She began to reach for him, but soon faltered and drew back. The years prior to his death had taught her that Naruto was no longer a child. Instead, she reached under the counter for a menu. So what will it be? We have some new flavors. She smiled at Sasuke as she placed the menu in front of Naruto. I'm assuming you will be having the usual, Sasuke? He grunted noncommittally. The usual? Am I missing something here? Naruto had not missed the exchange, much to Sasuke's chagrin. Business isn't the best these days, but Sasuke has been a regular for a while. Ayame was blissfully oblivious to the glare the Uchiha shot her way. If anything, she was amused by the yield her words had over a jounin. She continued to add, Maybe he miss you, Naruto. He managed to restrain the temptation enough so that he could place an order for large teriyaki chicken ramen, upsized to Naruto's size. He even managed to wait until it was cooked and simmering in front of him. But as soon as Ayame ducked back inside, Naruto sinfully ignored the heavenly aroma of his meal and turned to Sasuke with a painfully conspicuous, "So, shut up. I was just about to comment on how spiffing your hair looked today. Packin' shampoo is good, eh?" Naruto's face almost collided with his ramen bowl when Sasuke's hand connected with the back of his head, eliciting a crisp and familiar thwack sound. Some things really don't change, he thought, and realized that he was smiling. With a hearty "Itadakimasu," he dug into his ramen. Ayame was not a top-notch ramen chef's daughter for nothing, and he inhaled the noodles so quickly that he choked. Not even looking up, Sasuke pounded his back. Memories of his first meal with the Harunos flooded into his mind, of Sakura scolding him for his eating habits, and Kazuo introducing them. Wincing involuntarily, Naruto waved Sasuke off, heavy with thoughts, and choked again on his next mouthful. Sasuke finished his meal shortly after Naruto called for seconds, and sat drinking sake. The few times the latter glanced at his unspeaking companion, Sasuke had been gazing into space, his hooded eyes filled with incomprehensible emotions. Naruto had learned to decipher those emotions over the years, but now he had no idea what Sasuke was thinking. He simply could not tell anymore. "For years, he said conversationally. "So you're what, 21? 20. But oh, it's not November here, is it?" Sasuke gave him a calculating look. "No, it's April." Naruto frowned. He had arrived in Sakura's time believing it had been the 4th month. It was quite a coincidence. He was willing to bet that he would be able to guess what today's date was if he backtracked. The time distortions were perplexing. Why did he have to get sucked into a time that was his, yet not quite? Somewhere in the back of his mind, he wondered how much time had passed in Sakura's time in his short absence. She and Kazuo would worry about him if he was gone too long. He wished he hadn't been forced to leave so unexpectedly. In fact, a small part of him wished that he had never left. "Baka!" He shook his head and swiped Sasuke's sake jug. He drank directly from it, ignoring the threatening glares from its owner. "Baka!" Naruto muttered again to himself. Thinking like that felt traitorous to his friends. He knew he would do well to forget the time he had spent with the Harunos and start anew, but somehow, the prospect saddened him. Feeling that his appetite had abandoned him, Naruto quietly set down his chopsticks and reached for the sake again. He took a long swig from it, feeling the weight of Sasuke's look on him. He grinned sheepishly when he realized that he had finished the whole bottle. "I'll treat you next time," he promised. "I'm sorry." His apology drew Sasuke's look. They both knew that it was not about the drink. "You do care about our village. I shouldn't have said that. You grew up there, too. As if anything you say would affect me. Don't think too highly of yourself." The Sharingan user opened a second gourd of sake and poured them both a cup. Naruto grinned and lightly tapped the edge of his cup against Sasuke's. "Cheers." After drinking, Sasuke commented, "That wasn't like you. Nani? You know what I'm talking about." Naruto winced. He didn't know why he was playing dumb. Sasuke was right, it was not his way to fall into denial. He dangled his cup in front of him for a while, but put it down with a sigh when it became apparent that passing time would not deter his teammate. "I feel like I'm getting passed around like an unwanted soccer ball, on a field that has no goal," he admitted. The finely arched brow was an indication for him to continue. I guess you could also say that it's like looking forward to Christmas with no presents." He cycled through more analogies until Sasuke silenced him with a single look. "You don't want to tell me, do you?" he asked flatly. Naruto grinned. "Just saving it for a bedtime story." He got up from his seat. "I'm going to go back. I'm tired. Thanks for treating me, Sasuke." "I don't remember saying I would pay for you." Sasuke snorted. Don't be a cheapskate. Have this then." Naruto patted his pockets and scraped up a handful of spare change. He tossed the coin to the other man, who snatched it from the air. Sasuke studied the copper piece. "What currency is this?" "Never you mind. It's not going to be worth anything here. Just think of it as a souvenir from the future. Like your clothes? Naruto stopped mid-turn and followed Sasuke's gaze down to his garments. He could imagine that the style of clothing looked a bit strange to others. He wore a shirt and a pair of trousers just like anyone else, but the difference was still there, lingering beneath the surface. Naruto realized that he felt just like his clothes, misplaced. Yeah, like my clothes, he said absently, slipping his hands into his pockets. Night. Naruto, Sasuke called, but the blonde simply waved a hand and walked off. The Uchiha turned away. Something was different about Naruto, and the time difference was not to blame. This Naruto was more evasive and seemed to have too much on his mind. Had this been 4 years ago, he would not have messed up his composure so badly. He would have been enraged and devastated, yes, but he wouldn't go so far as to expressively attack a friend. Sasuke slowly flipped the foreign coin, his eyes glazing when he realized that he could no longer understand his best friend. Instead of returning to the administration building, Naruto wandered without purpose around the village. It was nearing midnight, and the majority of villagers had turned in for the night. He felt like he should join them. After all, he was tired. The Kyuubi was no longer capable of revitalizing him from chakra exhaustion overnight. In spite of his fatigue, Naruto did not think that being alone in an empty room was healthy for him right now. He saw more of the sand village, wondering how many of his friends were resting in those homes. He suspected that most of them would be out on missions, or busy with other preparations. Standing at the edge of the quiet village, it was hard to tell that it was under near constant threat of invasion. It felt odd to be left out of the war. He was used to being smack in the middle of it. Too used to it, maybe? He couldn't tell when he had begun to tire of it. The past month must have spoiled him. Naruto could feel it in his own veins. He could instantly tell that he would not be able to perform to his previous standards, not in terms of battle, but in motivation. He hadn't been able to stop working, bouncing from one station to the next, even burying himself in paperwork just to occupy time. Even back then, he had known that if he were to stop, he would run out of steam. Now, he had finally ground to a stop. It would not be easy relighting the spark within him. After all, it was hard for a man who had finally witnessed peace and freedom to return to the battlefield. Naruto was torn. He knew he had to fight, for he refused to live his life under Akatsuki's reign. They had to win. But his drive had been destroyed. No matter how selfless he could be, fighting for a village that was not his just didn't seem to fit. He had lost almost everything in a single blow that had been struck when he hadn't even been present. He felt horribly cheated. Deep down, he regretted using his chakra to produce that Rasengan. If he hadn't done that, he would probably still be living with the Harunos. His biggest worry would be being late for work, and the largest threat to his life would be Sakura's mood swings. Setting aside what was right and what was wrong, Naruto was agonizingly indecisive. When he had been in the future, he had never been able to stop thinking about his home and his friends. It had been so hard deciding to move on. But now, returned to his own period, nothing was as he had remembered. This was not what he had wanted, and he hated it. He was aware that he was being unfair. No one had had a choice, so why did wish he had been any different? But still. I don't belong anywhere. Naruto let his legs give way beneath him. He sank to all fours, clutching at the loose sand beneath his fingers. Cry, he willed himself. Scream. Run. But he couldn't. He was simply numb. Oblivious to how much time had passed, he made his way back to the administration building. Someone had been into his room while he had been gone. Laid at the end of the bed was a new Jounin uniform. Naruto dropped heavily onto the mattress and ran his hand along the flak vest's leather-like fabric. He spread the uniform across the bed, but found no forehead protector. After a long pause, he emptied his pockets of the spare change, old tissues, and the notebook Sakura had given him. He peeled off his clothes, folded them neatly, and set them aside. Then he picked up the navy shinobi outfit and began to pull the shirt over his head. You look pretty good in blue, Naruto. He froze. Please get out of my head, Sakura, he murmured. That night, Uzumaki Naruto went to bed feeling like the loneliest man on the planet. Chapter 6, Bring Me to Life. How can you see into my eyes like open doors? Leading you down into my core where I'd become so numb. Without a soul, my spirit sleeping somewhere cold. Until you find it there and lead it back home. Bring me to life, Evanescence. Kankura felt the shock waves from his office. He sprang out of his seat at once and whirled to the window. He caught but a glimpse of surprised villagers before the streets were engulfed by a powerful gust that whipped up a sandstorm on the spot. Those bastard Akatsuki dash! The Kazekage threw off his robe and charged toward the door. He was already unraveling a summoning scroll when the voice of his tactical advisor reached him. "Calm down, Kankuro. It's not an invasion." Kankuro whipped around, the scroll fluttering in his wake. He had completely forgotten about the conference he had been hosting with the other man until now. "What makes you so sure?" The creak of a wooden wheelchair spinning around found Kankuro staring into dark eyes. "Don't you recognize this chakra?" Kakuro paused as his companion jerked his head toward the window, where the storm outside was already starting to die out. Naro Shikamaru's expression was hidden behind the drifting smoke from his cigarette, but Kankuro could hear it in his voice, could see it in his own reflection in the window pane. A blank turmoil of wonder, relief, and, upon realizing his own thoughts, disgust. But that was how it was. Friends became pawns, and Kankuro had learned to deal. "He's back." The violent windstorm left smoldering cinders, flattened dunes and silence in its wake. Sasuke spat grit from his mouth and rose, brushing sand off his clothes. Upon contact, some of the small grains impossibly crumbled into minuscule specks of dust that were immediately swept away by the lightest breeze. Sasuke allowed himself a moment to taste the potent chakra lingering in the air. Raw, heavy, dangerous, just as he remembered. Naruto raised his gaze from his hands, feeling Sasuke's wordless stare. After a long pause, he gave a half-hearted chuckle. "What?" Sasuke bent down and reached for a kunai buried in the ground by his feet. His fingers brushed the hilt for a fraction of a second, the next it was slicing through the air with tremendous speed and purpose, en route for Naruto's eye. A rush of wind surged into the training ground. The kunai froze halfway between the two men and vibrated violently for a moment, before falling soundlessly to the sand. Naruto hadn't moved. "What?" he repeated, his voice devoid of amusement. Sasuke nodded at the ravaged field around them, studded with countless weapons that caught the glare of the sun's first rays. "You could have done the same with all of them," he said. "Why didn't you?" Naruto grimaced and turned his head. "I didn't feel like it." "You didn't feel like it?" Sasuke echoed. "We've been sparring all week, and you're saying that I had to seriously endanger your life just to make you feel like using a jutsu? What, did you think we were playing in a sandbox? You're making it sound like this is my fault." The blonde scowled. "Isn't it? You're a powerhouse. Why aren't you using chakra?" "Because I tend to flip the skirts of women miles away when I do." Sasuke crossed his arms. "What are you doing, Naruto? You've been acting strangely ever since you got back." Naruto could not help but snort. "I wonder why." "Answer the question." There was a certain authority in Sasuke's voice that Naruto wasn't used to hearing. The fact that it was being used on him further unsettled him. Forcing down a flash of annoyance, he muttered, "You won't understand, team. You're scared." Naruto snapped around with a deadly glare and indignant retorts on the tip of his tongue. But he fell mute when he met Sasuke's eyes. It kept slipping his mind that the man standing before him was Uchiha Sasuke, the teammate he had plunged into hell for and, since the outbreak of war, one of the only people he would let himself appear human to. He lowered his eyes. "Yeah, I am." Although he would never admit it, Naruto's confidence was to Sasuke what it was to everyone else, a reliable constant. To have it subdued unsettled him, but no more than the knowledge that Naruto was, for once in his life, running away. "Well?" Sasuke prompted. "What have you done about it?" Naruto looked up. "What do you mean?" "You can't live the rest of your life in fear, idiot. You don't know whether or not anything would happen if you used your chakra. You're just avoiding the problem." Naruto began to grow heated. "And what if I did disappear again? I'm needed here, aren't I? You're the one who said that, Sasuke, don't you forget it. Not if you're going to be useless." Naruto's head snapped around when he heard the unfaltering truth in the words. Sasuke stood unflinching under his friend's angry look. Flatly, he continued, "You won't be allowed on the front lines if you're just going to do something stupid and get yourself killed in the first wave. I'll make sure of it." "How is any of this my fault?" Naruto demanded, on the verge of tipping into anger. "It becomes your fault when you don't do anything about it." Sasuke spoke with unnatural coldness, like a commander showing a greenhorn the frayed ropes. "Have you tried asking the Kyuubi?" "I haven't had the chance to. I've been sleeping like a log." Somewhere in the back of his mind, Naruto was aware that he was grasping at straws. The realization deepened his frown. He couldn't remember when he had started rejecting the truth. "You're running out of excuses, Dobe." "Sasuke, drop it. I used a jutsu today, isn't that enough? I don't have the time to be your personal assassin just to make sure that you do it again on the battlefield." Naruto scowled. He knew he was acting like a child, but hadn't the last couple of months taught him that he was allowed to? Sasuke had no idea There was no reason he should. Naruto hadn't told anyone about Kazuo and Sakura. He couldn't help thinking that if he did, he would lose even those memories. Sasuke shook his head. Listen to me, Naruto. You know what it's like to fight in a war. You either hit the ground running or you trip, die, and drag down others with you. Talk to the Kyuubi. Soon. Understood? When he received no response, he flicked the blonde's forehead. Naruto shot him a glare. Understood? The blonde looked off to the side with a baleful expression on his features. The hand he had raised to his face slowly clawed over his hair before tightening into a fist and dropping to his side. Sasuke saw Naruto's eyes flash, heard his molars grinding together, and wondered if he was going to snap again. Finally, Naruto answered with a tight "fine," and went off to collect their weapons from the field. Sasuke's gaze followed him. You're mad. I am not. Liar. Naruto stopped and straightened, his head lowered. Surprised, Sasuke uncrossed his arms. I changed, Naruto said in a quiet voice that Sasuke almost missed. I don't know how, but I changed. Uncertain of how he should respond, the Uchiha remained silent. Naruto studied a kunai, twirling it nimbly in his fingers. I can still fight. If I just put my mind to it, I can catch up to everyone else, make up for the lost years. But you know something, Sasuke? He paused to chuckle faintly. It's like my body's tired of this. It doesn't want to go back on the field. I just changed somehow. He stared blankly into the distance. Watching him, Sasuke realized just how far away Naruto was. But instead of acknowledging the truth, Sasuke lied without knowing why. Not that much. Naruto looked over his shoulder, surprised. Then, slowly, he smiled. Yeah. Guess not. One of the things Naruto had to get used to was how quiet Suna was at night. Even with the fear of raids hovering over their heads, Konoha had had nightlife like no other. In some ways, people needed it. They needed the bright lights, open stores and chatter to escape. You couldn't keep yourself wound up all day. Naruto had been a firm workaholic until his friends had dragged him away from the squiggly maps of battle formations that he struggled to understand. It had felt like they pulled him through a magical portal, into a world that lasted only a few hours each night. But it was that excruciatingly normal world that fueled him to face what was waiting on the other side of the portal in the morning, and until he found himself walking through the sandy streets alone, Naruto hadn't realized that he could no longer indulge in that fantastical world. The pub was one of the only places open. Naruto had frequented it whenever he visited Gaara. He wasn't much of a drinker, but Gaara could mix the most bizarre beverages that Naruto was still to this day wondering how he had perfected the art. The mere thought of Gaara drunk never ceased to set off uncontrollable snickers from his fellow Jinchuriki. The tables were mostly empty but for a few lone veterans. Their heads came up when Naruto came through the door. He could tell that they were shinobi right away. They nodded respectfully to him, a gesture he returned. Despite everything, it seemed everyone still recognized him as a commanding officer, the fearless Uzumaki Naruto. No pressure, he thought to himself with a grim smile. Naruto settled in a table in the corner. He nursed his drink rather than drank from it, letting the coldness seep through the glass and into his skin. To the outsider, he was a rock. The shinobi in the room recognized the look of a veteran, but not for the first time. They wondered how someone as young as Uzumaki Naruto could have eyes older than theirs. The pub gradually emptied, until Naruto was alone with the bartender, a middle-aged man with eyes magnetically attracted to the door. The man had seen his fair share of loud drunks and bar fights, but nothing unnerved him more than a quiet night. He frowned when the door opened and let in a dusty breeze, but his face cleared when he recognized the newcomer. He nodded to the man and returned to rinsing the same glass. Are you going to drink that? Naruto raised his head. It took him a moment to recognize the face. Then he grinned. Hey, Shikamaru! How nice of you to come keep me, what is that? Shikamaru raised an eyebrow at Naruto's dumbstruck expression as the bundle in his lap squirmed. A baby? Here? This is a pub. Naruto twisted in his seat and gaped at the bartender. The man gave a wry smile. He turned back to his companion. Is he yours? Shikamaru nudged a chair around the table so he could park his wheelchair. The young boy reached with pudgy hands for the edge of the table. Shikamaru wrapped one hand around the baby's tummy and levered him up so that he was standing on his senseless legs, hands on the tabletop, and staring open-mouthed at Naruto's stunned face. Then the baby yawned and Naruto blinked. Holy Amaterasu! He is yours. Yeah, he screwed up my plans. I wanted to have a girl and then a boy. Plus he's made his mother even more tyrannical. Shikamaru pulled his son back before he could nibble on Naruto's coaster. It's so troublesome. Wow. Naruto stared at the kid. What's his name? Teru. Naruto took his eyes off the child for the first time. You named your kid Teru, he clarified. What's wrong with that? Shikamaru shrugged. It's nice and simple. With you as a father, we'll have to see how nice and simple he turns out. Naruto grinned. Shikamaru snorted. Naruto watched him casually fix the collar of his son's small jacket, and shook his head slightly. Who would have thought, huh? Shikamaru absently rubbed his knee, feeling a phantom ache well up in his joints. The discomfort was nothing more than a figment of his imagination, though. Shikamaru had no sensation in his lower body at all, not since the battle against Deidara that had spelled out the Akatsuki member's death and had left Shikamaru's legs damaged beyond repair. Naruto noticed the gesture and grimaced. I didn't mean dash. Shikamaru waved it away. Yeah, I know. I'm not exactly father material either. It must suck, Naruto said quietly after a short pause. Yeah. But everything works out alright. Saves me from all the bothersome stuff Neji and Shino have to do, and I have more time to look after this lazy ass. As if recognizing his cue, Teru slumped against his father's chest, contently closing his half-lidded eyes. Oh, now he decides to sleep. He kept me up all night. Shikamaru gently rubbed his son's back, his other hand flicking his wheelchair back and forth in a rhythmic rocking motion. The sight brought a smile to Naruto's face. What would Temari do if she found out you took her son to the pub? She is not going to find out, Shikamaru said steadily. Naruto almost burst into laughter. His friend actually looked terrified. Shikamaru shot him a look. She's not going to be back for another 2 days. She's out with her squad. Ice clinked against glass as Naruto swirled his drink with a thoughtful expression. You worried? Between you and me. Shikamaru knocked the wooden arm of his wheelchair, smiling grimly. I can't do anything even if I am. Blue eyes lowered sightlessly to the scratched tabletop. You're the smartest person I know, Shikamaru. Shikamaru focused his gaze on his friend. And you're the most troublesome person I know. Naruto laughed softly. When Shikamaru didn't respond, he sighed. A long, weary breath. I don't know what I'm doing anymore, Shikamaru. You drew up one hell of a storm today. And it scared the hell out of me. Because you thought you would disappear? Naruto paused in the midst of running a hand through his hair and looked up. Shikamaru met his eyes unwaveringly. Of course. Shikamaru was the tactical advisor. It was his job to know about everything. I'm going to fight, Shikamaru. I'm not giving up. That's not what I'm worried about. But you're right in guessing that's what I want to hear. Naruto smiled faintly. Bastard. Thanks. Teru whimpered in his sleep and Shikamaru adjusted his grip, holding his son closer as if that was all it took to protect him from everything. Do you know why I'm tactical advisor, Naruto? Because you're smart. Because I can be heartless. Shikamaru said flatly. I can do things most people can't, like sending my own friends and lover to missions they might not come back from. I can say things like, it doesn't matter if you think he changed, you have to fight because you are one of our strongest shinobi and we could really use you for this war. Naruto looked down at his drink, pensive. Then he brought his head back up. What other things can you say? That you're wrong if you think you're such an important piece that we can't see this through without you. Ouch. There's worse where that came from. Go on. The two men shared a long look. Then Shikamaru heaved a sigh. He hadn't done this in a long time, reminding his friend that it was only because he possessed flaws that he was human. He couldn't say he missed it. You can't fix everything, Naruto. You can't save everyone. I know that. Then stop telling yourself that you can. Naruto shook his head. His hands clenched around the glass. I screwed up, Shikamaru. I'm the last Jinchuriki left and I let myself get captured. You know what that means? It means, Shikamaru said, you're being unbelievably selfish. Naruto's head snapped up. What? You heard me. You're not a one-man team. Shikamaru's voice was low but his words struck chords. You aren't the only one who screwed up, Naruto. You were gone for 4 years and in that time, we were the ones fighting. We couldn't defend our village. We can't fix that, alright? I once made a miscalculation and sent 3 squads straight into a trap, to their deaths. Look at me, Naruto. Because the blonde had turned his head to one side, hiding his haunted eyes. Stop thinking that everything is your fault. Think about us, the ones who were actually there the whole time. Think about how we feel. Naruto didn't say anything. Shikamaru leaned back. Damn it, Naruto, he muttered. You know you're not fighting alone. Silence fell between the two men. The bartender wiped down the bench and tactfully retreated into the storeroom. There was no sound but for the rustle of sand outside, and Teru's soft, peaceful breathing. When Naruto finally spoke, his voice was cracked, tortured. He had removed his hands from the table and had them clenched in the shadows. I let him down, Shikamaru. He slowly raised his head, revealing agonized eyes. I let him down. Shikamaru silently watched his friend. In the back of his mind a roll of memories played, showing him all the times he had stayed up with Teru and had a Chunin burst urgently into his house, all the hours he had spent by Tamari's hospital bed, all the smiles, scowls and stop looking like that she had given him. He closed himself to all of it, something he was getting very good at doing. Slowly, he backed his wheelchair away from the table. He laid a scarred hand on Naruto's shoulder and said, Jiraiya wanted you to stop the hatred in this world. Start with yourself. Forgive and forget, Naruto. Sometimes the only way you can fight is to pretend that you have nothing to lose. Then he was alone. Naruto stared at his untouched drink for a long time, his dull eyes searching for something in the melted ice. Say, why can't you go home? Sakura's voice. Naruto dropped his head into his hands and let the world revolve without him, while he sat there with trembling shoulders and muffled sobs. I have to go somewhere, Sakura. Where? Let me look at you properly. I don't want to leave you. I really don't. Then why? Be a good girl, Sakura. I'll see you again soon, maybe. Wait. Hello. Sakura! The pink-haired girl slowly opened her eyes. Her vision swam. Oh, now she's awake. Ino rolled her eyes. So sorry to interrupt your beauty sleep, princess, but in case you've forgotten, we kind of have an exam in the next dash. She checked her watch. 15 minutes. Don't die on me now. Sakura groaned and waited for the panic to consume her. It was a lost cause, she couldn't concentrate anymore. What made it impossible was the mysterious feeling that she had to hold on to the wispy vestiges of her dream for as long as she could. She always had for years, every time she had the same dream, trying to retain those words, that scent, those hands. This time, though, she couldn't help but feel that it was different. She woke up with an even larger hollow in her chest, with the thin voice whispering over and over again. I'll see you again soon, maybe. Ino shook her head when she saw that her words were falling on deaf ears. Geez, forehead, can't you at least pretend you're putting some effort into this so we commoners can feel more accomplished when we get better results than you? At this, Sakura jerked herself out of her reverie to shoot an accusing glare at her best friend. Touchwood. Now. Her voice sounded distant even to herself. She shook her head roughly. She didn't have time for this. The sound of breezy laughter reminded the two that they were not alone in the courtyard. Relax, Sakura, you'll ace the exam even with your head halfway to Mars. Yamazaki Kenjiro chided from the next table. It's us dummies who should be worrying. Sakura turned to take in his amused grin, the easy tranquility in his eyes, and couldn't help but wonder what was missing. When she realized what it was, an epiphany that struck her every morning when she entered the classroom to his perky greeting, she put on a teasing smile and replied. Yeah, mister, I'm second in the grade, shouldn't you be worrying? Actually, I was waiting for Miss I'm first and can afford to nap to explain enantiostasis to my humble self. Ino leaned forward eagerly. Explain it to me too. But it was the fourth person that Sakura watched for, and when those meek eyes met hers, she forced herself to empty her mind. Enantiostasis. She began, looking away. It's a really easy concept once you understand osmoconformers and osmoregulators. She didn't think it would be so hard. She tried not to notice them, the way Ken let her look over his shoulder as he jotted down notes, the way he would laugh and pat her head when she looked confused, the way he shared his childhood, their childhood, so easily with her, the way he said her name, and how it rang with a certain joy that fell flat against Sakura's, even though they were in the same sentence, seen through the same eyes. Hey Sakura, can you help Yumi with Punnett squares? You know I can't explain. She stared at that sheepish expression, the look in his eyes that no longer matched hers because he had finally left the past in the past, with her in it. Then she looked at the girl those eyes kept sneaking looks at, and suddenly all she could do was smile falsely because there was nothing else left for her to do. Come sit here and I'll teach you, Yumi. The only thing Ken can explain coherently is tennis. Not true. Ino stared hard at her textbook and listened to her longtime friends laugh and bicker, just like they used to, because watching was simply too painful. Pick up the slack, monkeys! One more lap! We've done 14 already, one of the boys yelled down in breathless protest. 17, actually, Naruto corrected conversationally. What do they teach you at school? The smallest girl pouted and kicked her legs, almost succeeding in clipping Naruto's ear. Can I come down? I need to pee. He peered long and hard at her. Let me think about it. He dragged out, and stroked his chin. Another small kick. Please? His tanned face broke in a wide smile. All right, cutie. Come here. He bent over below the girl, and with a beat of hesitation, she released the bar and dropped onto his back. He grunted as she hopped to the ground. At least I know they're feeding you chimps. He sighed, brushing off his jacket. Off you go. Toilets that way. The kids dangling over his head sniggered. Naruto frowned at them. What? Toilets that way. Blinking, he turned his head left and right. Hell, all the domed buildings looked the same. He scratched his head. Yeah, just testing you. Stupid. That's one more lap. Naruto made no effort to hide his wicked grin as a chorus of groans rang from the dozen academy students he had doing laps on the hanging obstacle course above. No wonder Iruka-sensei didn't resign despite all the catastrophic pranks he'd had to deal with. Naruto had been training with these kids for 2 weeks now, and for some reason having a majestic sandcastle built on him during his nap entertained more than infuriated him. What did infuriate him was the fact that, fun as it was, he wasn't supposed to be babysitting 6-year-old children whose academy instructors had been called to duty. But what downright incensed him was himself. He didn't know what he wanted anymore. Kankura had told him he wouldn't be returned to full duty until they could determine what Akatsuki's recent lack of activity meant. Naruto was ashamed to feel relieved. He absently watched the children clamber over a high ledge. The best interests of the village had always been his as well, but lately he had discovered a growing distance between the two. He didn't want to fight, but he would. He didn't want to be here, but he was. He didn't want to think this way, but he couldn't stop. His thoughts were rudely interrupted by a sharp tug of his hair. He yelped and glared up at the culprit, who had already scampered away, laughing with his friends. Naruto stuck his tongue out. He patted his hair back down. It was more unruly than he was used to in Suna's windy climate. He made a mental note to get it trimmed. He was used to having a forehead protector keeping it from his eyes. Then he heard a low cooing and looked over his shoulder to see Shikamaru bouncing a restless Teru on his lap. Naruto suppressed a snort of disbelief at the sight. He still had mild difficulty coming to terms with the idea of Shikamaru as a parent. Shut up, you! His old friend grumbled flatly after one look at Naruto's face. I didn't say anything. Sure. Naruto crouched and beamed brightly at Shikamaru's son. The toddler stared back at him. He gently prodded a cherubic cheek. Teru yawned. He raised an eyebrow at Shikamaru. Does he always do that? Only when he finds something boring, I suppose. Thanks, man. Meanwhile, the kids on the obstacle course had finished their laps and were loudly demanding their supervisors back to step down on. Naruto didn't miss the smirk on Shikamaru's face. Shut up, you! He returned. I didn't say anything. His companion chuckled. Naruto held up his hands as he approached the squawking children. All right. Sure you guys don't want another lap? No. No? You're not sure? Maybe one more dash. No. Naruto winced, digging a finger into his ear. I hear you. One at a time, okay? And don't squash me. It's not nice. They began to squabble over the order. Laughing uneasily, he tried to placate them. I know I'm popular and all, but really, you don't need. The words died in his throat as he whipped around, blood draining from his face. He lunged even as he knew he was too slow. Shikamaru dash! A thunderous plume of sand erupted before his eyes, rocking the vicinity with heavy shocks. The children screamed as the bars trembled beneath them. Blindly, Naruto snapped an arm to the side and a whirlwind rose between the playground and the storm of flame and shrapnel. Then he pivoted in time to throw himself back as a blur of bandages and jagged teeth shaved the debris inches from his face. He had barely regained his footing when Kisame Hashigaki burst from the sand like a predator on a blood trail. There was no time to be surprised, even though he really wasn't. Naruto quickly flattened to evade Samehada's next swing. Kisame's leg swept up even as the sword passed over his head. Naruto intercepted the blow with his arm and, gritting his teeth, thrust a hasty Rasengan into Samehada's underside as it snapped at him. It quickly began to devour his chakra with crazed frenzy. The Rasengan eroded away until all that kept Naruto's head on his shoulders was the hand forcing the ravenous sword from his face. Blood trickled down his arm in rivulets. He didn't flinch, even when Kisame leaned in within a proximity that made Naruto's breath catch in his throat. He misses your chakra. The monster of the hidden mist grinned. It's been too long. Where have you been playing mouse, Uzumaki Naruto? He smiled grimly. Somewhere you pussies aren't allowed. Kisame's lips peeled back in a humorless smile, flashing pointed teeth. Bracing his leg against the sand, Naruto released Samehada and twisted away while the sword pummeled into the ground. He snapped up a roundhouse kick that Kisame countered moments before a spray of sand blinded him. Naruto sprang back to release a brace of shuriken, and cursed when his impaled opponent burst into a torrent of water. He whirled around, expecting Samehada's snapping teeth, and his eyes widened when he saw nothing but the large, frightened eyes of the girl who had returned from the toilet. The petrified scream that split the air was drowned by Naruto's roar of outrage. "You low bastard, let go of her!" Kisame eyed with distaste the crying girl he had dangling from her pigtails. "You peace-loving fools are very good at raising weaklings. Itachi was an exception." He frowned at the high-pitched sobs. "Do you want me to rip out your tongue?" A guttural growl trembled in Naruto's throat. "Let her go. Why do you stand there like an idiot, Uzumaki Naruto?" Kisame spread his arms. The girl cried out as her scalp began to bleed. The wind seemed to rush from his path as he lunged. Kisame shook his head. He was a fool, he knew. He was a fool for trying to deny the inevitable. He was a fool for letting Kankura keep him in the village even when he knew that his life was all it would take to massacre hundreds of others. He'd known all along that they would come for him. He'd known, and yet he couldn't stomach the reality that after all he'd been through, nothing had changed. He knew, goddammit. "Stop it!" He couldn't breathe or see. All he could hear was the endless echo of his desperate voice reverberating in his skull, and the rush of blood in his head. Only when he felt a wetness on his shirt did he slowly look down at the girl held tight in his arms. Numbly, he realized that she was crying into his chest, grabbing him with such strength that it hurt. She was alive. His heart almost imploded as he squeezed her even tighter. He patted her head with a trembling hand, trying not to stare at the mixture of both their bloods on his skin. "Shh. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry," was all he could whisper as she cried harder. "TCH, Deidara should have taken your arms, not your legs." Naruto looked over his shoulder. Kisame stood with his back to him, arms still raised with fingers clenching a few strands of tawny hair. Samehada wiggled and strained uselessly for the prey it had been a beat from tasting. Tracing the thick shadowy chains, Naruto let out a relieved sigh when he saw Shikamaru. He would never forget the murderous look in his friend's eyes as he cradled his son to his chest, whom he had shielded from the shards of shattered wheelchair that littered the back of his crimson-saturated vest. "Quick, Naruto! I can't hold him for long!" Shikamaru shouted hoarsely. Naruto came to his senses. He stared at Kisame. Then he looked back at the trembling girl in his arms, who had calmed enough to watch him with fearful eyes. He tried to smile, but thought it came out as a grimace. Kisame chuckled. "I knew it!" Shikamaru didn't understand what the Akatsuki member did, or wouldn't believe it. "What are you waiting for? Naruto!" "I can't," the blonde said in anguish. He didn't meet Shikamaru's eyes, not wanting to see his betrayed expression. "I can't." Kisame began to strain, experimentally clenching his fingers slowly. Shikamaru didn't say anything, jaw rigged and defined. Then Teru, who had been stunned into silence, whimpered and began to sniffle, and his father's strong arm braced him to his chest. His hands flicked into seals. "Kagekubashibari no Jutsu." Naruto watched the dark hand snake up Kisame's thick neck. It began to constrict tremulously. The Sharkman watched the shadow with slitted eyes that suggested amusement. Shikamaru cursed as his vision began to dim. He struggled to focus on Naruto, who had released the girl, risen to his feet and was speaking lowly to Kisame. "Why do you have to be so stubborn, Naruto?" he ground out. Naruto pretended he hadn't heard. He continued muttering to Kisame. The latter smirked, all razor-sharp teeth. "Naruto!" Naruto stopped as if caught red-handed. "I can't do it, Shikamaru," he said finally. He looked at the children, his monkeys, and clenched his hand, nails cutting into repaired skin. "I can't do it in front of them. They'll see death anyway. If you don't dash." "I know. But we have a very short childhood, you know? I can't kill in cold blood in front of these kids if I can help it. You can't want this for your son." "Listen, Naruto dash." "Let me do this, Shikamaru!" Naruto interjected loudly. He shook his head. "I remember what you said. You guys were the ones fighting while I was gone. Do you know how cheated I feel? Do you know what it's like to be tossed around and finish at a place that doesn't feel like home, where I can only make things worse by being here?" He caught movement in the corner of his eye. Jounins and Chunins had swarmed to the scene, warily spreading themselves. With Kankuro and Sasuke at a summit enlightening, they felt a heavier duty upon their shoulders. If not for Naruto, they would have sprung on the fearsome intruder. As it were, they were barely holding themselves back while the Jinchuriki stood against the Kazekage's tactical advisor. Let me handle this, Shikamaru. Give me a chance to feel like I'm not a coward. I'll protect this place. Let me protect the king my own way. Naruto looked past Kisame at Shikamaru. Let him go. No, the other man said. A flash of pain flickered across the deep lines of effort on his face, betraying fatigue. Shikamaru was having difficulty breathing. Still, he persisted. I told you, you're not a one-man team. Naruto just shrugged and smiled helplessly. At that moment, a sun broke out from a cloud directly above them. The shadows dimmed, slowly inching away. Shikamaru narrowed his eyes. In one great heave, Kisame broke free. The sound of weapons being drawn filled the air, but no one moved. Kisame paid no heed to the fact that he was surrounded. Instead, he glanced down at the figure standing beside him, blonde head lowered. You're naive, kid. Naruto ignored him. His eyes were steel. If you have a shred of honor, you will keep your word. Shinobi tensed when Kisame swung Samehada over his back. Don't tempt me. I'm warning you. If you so much as dash. I said, don't tempt me, brat. I said. Naruto growled dangerously, sounding like a cornered animal. I'm warning you. Kisame just smirked. This was going to be fun. Shikamaru yelled, but no one could move before the two men vanished. There was a beat of breathless silence, and then Teru began to wail. The worst weary, returning shinobi could be greeted with was a village in chaos. From the moment Hinata and Neji had failed to sense Suna's protective barrier even when they were well within its range, they had already prepared themselves for such a sight. They had been away for almost a month, after all. They had been due back earlier, much earlier, but Hinata was adamant not to return empty-handed and Neji never took risks when his clan's young leader was involved. Together, they had stretched a reconnaissance into an infiltration, ambush, and intelligence-gathering raid. It wasn't their first, and they knew Kankuro would be livid but grateful. They were used to this. But even to this day, there were many things Hinata would never grow accustomed to, and the inescapable fear that put her heart in her mouth whenever she felt she was on the verge of losing something precious, was one of them. Neji. She breathed, even as her cousin's Byakugan seeped into his eyes, and he stopped a harried Chunin in his path. What happened here? He demanded. Relief was palpable on the man's face as he recognized the authoritative figure. Few rivaled Uchiha Sasuke in level-headedness and cold efficiency the way Hyuga Neji could. As the agitated man began to explain almost incoherently, a small crowd of hasty shinobi rushed past. Hinata's heart skipped a beat when she recognized a familiar chakra signature. Shikamaru! She was by the stretcher so quickly the men carrying it flinched. Hinata barely noticed. She was staring horrified at Shikamaru. Her former classmate was in terrible shape, lying on his front to allow her a clear view of the bloody, impaled mess that was his back. Yet his grip, when he reached out to seize her arm, was strong. Hinata started. Shikamaru dash. Go after him. He ground out hoarsely, breathlessly. Who? Hinata hadn't stuttered in a long time. When she did, it was almost always bad news. Just go after dash. Shikamaru sucked in a tight breath that hissed out through clenched teeth. His eyelids fluttered as his frown deepened. When he met Hinata's confused gaze, his eyes were agonized. Naruto, go after Naruto! For a moment that felt longer than it lasted, Hinata wondered if she and Shikamaru had swapped places, if she were the one on the stretcher struggling to breathe as the name ripped up a fresh torrent of grief, pain and memories. Staring wide-eyed was all she could do to keep her mind in the present. Naruto? Hinata whispered. Shikamaru lifted a bleeding hand to cradle his son, who was sobbing by his face. His features twisted briefly. Anger? Regret? Distantly, Hinata wondered what had happened. But her thoughts were racing faster than a shunshin, and she realized she was slowly shaking her head. Shikamaru? What do you mean, go after Naruto? And Naruto is dash. Alive? Shikamaru said. Hinata felt her mouth fall open, felt her lower lip tremble. She could hear her voice asking, where is he? Not how, not why. Because Uzumaki Naruto could make the impossible happen. Hinata knew this. To her surprise, Shikamaru chuckled, pain flashed across his scrunched-up features. Where? Ha! I don't know. I don't know. His voice trailed off and he squeezed his eyes shut. Damn it, I don't know! He shouted in sudden anguish. The men supporting the stretcher shuffled uneasily. They were disconcerted by the amount of blood the tactical advisor was losing, but they knew better than to interrupt. They only watched as Shikamaru gripped Hinata's wrist so tightly it seemed like the blood that drained from his knuckles transferred directly into her flushed skin. "Hinata!" he heaved out. Abruptly, he flung his head to the side as if to shake off unconsciousness. "Find him. That idiot, he went off, just go!" He released her at the last word, flinging her arm aside as if it burned him. And she was gone. Away from Shikamaru, past Neji and his confused calls after her, out the gates and plunging into the barren desert, all before she could breathe again. Her legs carried her across the sand as if they knew where to go. But they didn't, and eventually Hinata felt herself slow to a stop. With great control, she forced her mind to stop spinning. She tried to think, tried to be logical and strong as she usually was. But when her Byakugan showed her nothing but dunes and sweeping sandstorms, Hinata jerked into motion again. It was suddenly impossible for her to stand still while the seconds trickled by. "Naruto!" She called softly around the lump in her throat, as if she thought he would hear her. In the next instant, she ran her hand across her eyes in faint horror. She headed for the country's border, trying to pretend she knew how to find him. Anything. She'd try anything. What was there to lose? It wasn't like she hadn't been forced to accept that Naruto was gone. They had lost him once already. That he was somehow back was nothing short of a miracle. It only proved that Naruto was Naruto, which meant that, wherever he had gone, he would be back. Right? It wasn't like... Hinata pushed the heel of her palm into her eyes. A frustrated sob choked behind closed lips. She told herself it was the sand, over and over again like a mantra. But when the tears continued to fall, Hinata gave up trying to stop them. She let them slide down her cheeks, mingling with dirt and sand. It was uncanny, but Shinobi always seemed to know. Hinata had dreaded the sight of Shino waiting outside her door, even before she had noticed that Kiba and Akamaru were nowhere in sight. She had started crying uncontrollably the moment Hayashi had patted her head as they stood surrounded in their dead, burning village, somehow convinced it was the last time she would see her father again. And now, as she threw herself against the rough winds, Hinata felt a dizzying lurch in her chest that put fresh tears in her eyes. Maybe Shikamaru had felt it too. Maybe by now, Neji would see what was going on and he, too, would understand. Maybe he would do as Hinata had, and throw logic and fatigue aside and search for that contagious hope that Uzumaki Naruto brought everywhere. They couldn't help it. It was Naruto. Naruto was the reason for Hinata's fluttering joy and deep foreboding, the reason for her wet, shining cheeks and the reason she went after him, fighting the sinking feeling that, somehow, she was already too late. Sasuke would call him an idiot. Somehow, that was all Naruto could think as he stepped through a low bush. It was funny how that made him smile. He could always rely on Sasuke for a reality check. Fortunately or unfortunately, Sasuke wasn't here, wasn't even close. Eyeing the black and red cloaks swishing in front of him, Naruto wondered if he would feel better if he had Sasuke with him. He wasn't in the mind to try denying that he wasn't shivering with adrenaline and hoping muscle memory would get him further than he felt ready for. "Oh," he called out sharply. "Are we there yet?" A chuckle from Kisame. "Still loud and stupid, I see." Naruto scowled. "What? I could be leading you into a trap. You ever thought of that? You're really underestimating me, aren't you?" Without breaking stride, Naruto ducked beneath a low branch that Kisame had purposefully let snap back behind him. "If you came looking for me in Suna expecting that I'd spare your life to lead you away from it, I wouldn't feel bad walking into a trap as ingenious as that." This time, Kisame laughed. The rough, coarse bark drove the few birds in the trees into the air. "That almost sounded like Itachi. You used to be a lot more stupid." Nerves or not, Naruto had a mouthful to respond to that, but Kisame chose that moment to stop walking and the blonde boy halted just as abruptly to maintain the wary distance between them. "This can be our battleground." There had been a time when Naruto couldn't tell an upside-down map from a right-way-up one. He still couldn't, not without a helpful hand, but experience had kept him versed in geography. His priority had been to lead Kisame away from Suna. As soon as he had accomplished that, it gradually sank in that he had left a village of combat-ready shinobi to be alone in foreign land with an Akatsuki member at his back. Idiot indeed, but he refused to have it any other way. Naruto was acutely aware of his situation when Kisame spoke up near Wind Country's border. He tensed, kunai flashing into hand, and whirled only to find his opponent rolling his eyes. "We're far enough from your precious little village, aren't we?" They were actually. "I want us out of the country." "Then I'll lead. The way you're running around, we'll never get some action." Now Naruto surveyed Kisame's choice, a dark, deep tunnel. Kisame stepped into the dark without hesitation. Narrowing his eyes, Naruto followed. He missed the slight ledge at the entrance and splashed noisily into cold, shallow water. Kisame's laugh bounced hollowly off the rock walls. Grumbling, Naruto waded after him. He was genuinely beginning to suspect a trap when the tunnel broke into a large, cavernous cave. With a jolt, Naruto realized where they were. He glanced at Kisame. "You're trying to be funny, right?" The blue man walked towards the center of the cave. "I'll bring you down in the place where you were supposed to die 4 years ago." He flashed a jagged grin over his shoulder. "Delightful, hmm?" Naruto moved away from the tunnel. Yeah? It didn't matter to him where they fought. The fact that Kisame hadn't tried to ambush him along the way meant that the Akatsuki member felt the same way. From his brushes with him, Naruto could see that Kisame wasn't like that foul-mouthed Hidan. Hidan would have loved a rampage in the village. Kisame was focused only on his target. Location and audience were irrelevant. Naruto was glad. He would be even more grateful if Akatsuki would leave him alone. Only that was impossible for as long as he had the Kyuubi within him, and as soon as he didn't, the shinobi world would never be the same again. The fact that the other nations still stood meant that Akatsuki's plans had been foiled by Kyuubi's refusal to be sealed by them. Naruto felt a faint-hearted bubble of mirth tug at his lips. The Nine Tails was almost a savior. Unlike him. Naruto felt calm as he watched Kisame stop at the far wall and casually flex his neck. Everything he'd been through lately didn't really matter when it still came down to this. Naruto knew he was standing on a tightrope. One misstep and it would be Akatsuki's victory. It was enough to make him grimace. Maybe he shouldn't have distanced their fight from Suna. Naruto had hardly doubted himself before, not because he didn't, but because he never gave himself the time to stop and think about it. Staying with the Harunos had changed that. The despair of standing in the wake of his own failure was too suffocating to ignore. He had lied to Sasuke, and Sasuke had lied to him. Uzumaki Naruto had changed. That's nothing, he thought to himself. All I've got to do is change again. Easy. Because he'd seen it happen, every time he sparred with Sasuke. As soon as Naruto cleared his mind and stopped thinking, his body would know what to do. Question, Kisame said. He calmly swung Samehada from his back. What kind of trick did you pull during the extraction? At least grinning was still second nature. Trade secret. Kisame snorted. Fine. Here's a warning, leader won't ask nicely. Naruto's chakra rose to meet the heavy killer intent that weighed down the moist air. He was alone with the monster of the hidden mist. Even Sakura would say he was stupid for putting himself in the situation. If he made it back to the village, Kankuro would skin him for sure. Naruto shook his head lightly. They wouldn't understand. They didn't know what it was like to be welcomed back into a life that had existed without him for years. A life his mere presence jeopardized. He shouldn't have returned. The water beneath Naruto's feet rippled. A thunderous roar shook the cave as a geyser erupted from the ground. Samehada sliced through the empty air. Water cascaded down in a steaming spray. Naruto dug his kunai deeper into Kisame's severed spinal cord. I actually thought you were a one-trick pony for a moment there. He grunted. Water broke around his wrist as Kisame's disfigured form collapsed. Icy tendrils raced up Naruto's arm. Within seconds they had snared him. Ignoring the chill of the ice freezing over his skin, Naruto clenched a fist, braced his feet into the ground, and let out a short yell. Chakra burst from his pores. Shards of ice tinkered to the ground. Naruto whirled abruptly, kunai flying from his fingers. It slammed into Samehada's bandaged hide and the sword shivered, a foul chakra leaking through the binds. Kisame grinned behind the large sword. Naruto didn't think before diving forward as a wave of bullets flew above his head. Movement in his peripheral vision. Naruto shot up in a back flip as Samehada cut below him. The blade brushed past his shin, leaving behind a hot, unpleasant tingle, before it slammed into the wall. Kisame didn't stop. Still airborne, Naruto quickly braced himself as a heavy fist threw him backwards with incredible force. Kisame's hands blurred. Suiton, Suikoden no Jutsu! Naruto's feet had barely touched the rough wall when his opponent became obscured by a vortex of water that bled into jagged teeth. It flew at Naruto with a howl. The blonde narrowed his eyes and his fingers clenched with chakra, the air beneath his palm vibrating uncontrollably. Staring into the shark's gaping mouth, Naruto snapped his arm out to the side like a knife. The jutsu broke too. Kisame rapidly sidestepped in time to evade the blade of wind. His brow pulled down in concentration, Naruto flicked his wrist sharply. It took a beat for Kisame to realize and flicker across the cave as a deep horizontal gash tore into the rock behind him. Wryly swiping a trickle of blood from his cheek, Kisame twisted his head in time to see a mass of shadow clones filling his vision. Naruto straightened as his opponent disappeared beneath the bodies. Unconsciously, he flexed his right hand. He had a good grasp on Baki's jutsu by now, had for years, but controlling the unruly wind blades once they had left his hand took effort. Kisame probably wouldn't fall for that one again. Which was why, after Kisame threw off the clones with a large jet of water from his mouth, he spun and found the original Naruto standing between him and Samehada. He smirked. Twin surges of water discharged from their heels as the two of them shot forward. Kisame's blows were hard and powerful, shuddering up Naruto's limbs with each impact. The large man was surprisingly lithe and agile for his size, but Naruto thought he could be faster. And he was. He knocked the Akatsuki member back a step with a well-placed kick and was already behind him before the latter could put up his guard. A quick sweep took Kisame's legs out from beneath him, while the strong grip Naruto had on the back collar of his cloak easily jerked the Sharkman back and over the crouched blonde. Bracing his hands against the wet ground, Naruto tried to remember if he'd ever mastered his favorite jutsu without hand seals. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu! He forced out through gritted teeth, only a second before his leg shot up and slammed into Kisame's broad back. Naruto didn't stop even when the faint pops of a dozen clones springing into existence signaled that he had been successful. He quickly put both hands together, chakra whirling between his palms. His eyes tracked Kisame as he was successively pounded upwards by each clone. Faster, faster, he mentally urged when his opponent momentarily hung in the air. Then the last clone sent its knuckles hammering into Kisame's ribs, and the man plummeted. Naruto drove his right arm upwards. Rasengan! Blood spurted into the air. The water by Naruto's feet grew pink. In the dim darkness, Kisame's jagged teeth flashed eerily. Who's the one-trick pony, As familiar, searing needles of pain pricked his palm, Naruto had to admit that it was probably him. To think that Kisame had kept a thread of chakra attached to Samehada's hilt all along, and that he could jerk the sword across the cave and beneath his falling body in the flick of a finger. He was a lot trickier than Kakuzu and Hidan. As the howl of his Rasengan began to die, Naruto could only pull his arm away and leap backwards as Samehada came crashing down on his previous spot. The sword was bulging beneath the bandages, and it let out a muffled whine of pleasure. Chuckling, Kisame spit out a small wad of blood and blew the bandages off with a casual chakra surge. The scaly sword shook itself out with sinister sentience, its serrated fangs gleaming. Told you he misses your chakra. No kidding. Crimson dripped steadily from Naruto's hand. The wound wasn't as deep as the first time he'd been forced to catch Kisame's sword, but it was enough to be a hindrance. He waited for the familiar warmth of his skin stretching back together, the tingle of torn muscle rejoining. Instead, he was knocked back a step by the sudden vertigo that had dropped on his head. Naruto muttered a curse and steadied himself. He didn't remember taking a head wound, and even though blood was streaming from his torn palm for the second time that day, it was far from enough to make him this woozy. Across from him, Kisame seemed to raise an eyebrow. Naruto frowned as he glimpsed faint, ghosting outlines of the Akatsuki's head. Kisame's lips were moving. It took far too much concentration for Naruto to tune out the distant buzzing in his cranium in order to hear him. Didn't get enough sleep? Maybe that was it. But that was only wishful thinking. Naruto knew what insomnia felt like, and it had never made staying upright this difficult. Then Kisame was lunging at him again. Biting out an expletive, Naruto flung himself out of the way as Samehada snapped under his arm. Grounding his teeth against the way the ground seemed to tip beneath his feet, Naruto twisted with a kunai. Kisame caught him by the wrist. His knee rushed up too quickly to be avoided. Naruto threw himself backwards, but it did little to lessen the jarring crunch against his jaw. His head snapped back, his teeth coming down hard on the inside of his mouth. He hardly felt the chill of the shallow water as he crashed into it. There was no time to do anything but roll to the side as Kisame's large presence bore down on him. Shakily flipping back to his feet, Naruto blindly pulled his hands together and summoned a flurry of clones to stall. He meant to use the opportunity to shake himself out of whatever untimely nausea had hit him, something he'd eaten maybe? But Naruto had not counted on his surroundings to start spinning, the echoing sounds of Kisame's snarls to drone into a steady pounding in his head. He staggered backwards and knocked into something hard and rough. A wall, he thought faintly, and it occurred to him that this was very bad. He was cornering himself. But his knees were trembling, his head was aching, his hand was still bleeding, and he suddenly couldn't tell which way was up anymore. All he knew was this felt vaguely familiar, yet for the life of him he could not remember when and where he'd experienced it. Shit, Naruto mumbled. This was so bad. If this went on, Kisame would be able to throw him around like a doll. He didn't know what the hell was going on with him, only that he needed more time. Kisame had almost ripped through all the shadow clones. With great effort, Naruto lifted his hands. Kage Bundash! Fool! The guttural growl broke into Naruto's consciousness like a dam. If not for the wall behind him, Naruto would have been tipped off his feet. The ground refused to stay still. Damn it, Kyubi! He muttered heavily. He was breaking out in cold sweat. When he blinked, the world went black and the Nine-Tails' large, slitted eyes flashed. Panicking, Naruto blinked rapidly and shook his head until the dim cave swam back into sight. The faint blurs flickering in the distance had to be Kisame and the clones. He could have sworn they hadn't been so far away before. Fool! The nine-tailed fox snarled again. You did it again. What? Did what? Naruto thought. He didn't really trust his voice at the moment, just in case slurred words weren't the only things that came up. You disrupted the chakra balance. We're starting to fade. Fade? Thanks to your idiocy, we are being rejected from this time. We're being pulled back into the dimension rift, you dense bull. Naruto didn't hear the insult. The thick fog in his head gave way to a rising sense of dread. What do you mean? If he was speaking aloud, his voice would be nothing above a whisper. He could imagine the demon snorting in exasperation. The Kyubi was agitated. That was enough to thicken the foreboding in Naruto's gut. He hadn't seen the Nine-Tails this riled since they had realized that Sakura's world was not their own. Eyes widening, Naruto quickly looked down at his hands. Relief rushed through his trembling body when he saw that they were still whole, solid. But then he curled his fingers slightly and realized that he could not feel them. No! He murmured. No, no! He clenched his senseless fists. Kyubi! Make it stop! Do something! Do not order me around, human, the demon roared in his head. You should not have let your chakra reserves fall so low that you would draw on mine. With a jolt, Naruto recognized that hollow pang in his navel. Empty chakra reserves. The same as when he'd woken up in the park to find himself in a world where ninja did not exist. In spite of it all, he managed to ask, what does using your chakra have to do with this? Are you pulling us through time to get out of this? I swear, if you're the one. Look at where we are, Naruto, the Kyubi hissed through his scrambled thoughts. This is where those ignorant hooligans tried to extract me from you. This is where I tore through time and space. Naruto stared at the walls of the cave, even further away than before now, as if he were already, no. He gripped the rock behind his back, his nails splitting against the stone. It didn't hurt. He hadn't come here for this. He was supposed to defeat Kisame and protect the people he'd failed once already. He wouldn't let this happen. He couldn't. He had to stay around for Sasuke to scold him for being so stupid, and he'd take those scornful words every minute of every day if it meant he could stay. He couldn't abandon them. Confirms it, the nine-tailed fox was muttering. Naruto was too numb to respond, but the demon continued anyway. I am a body of chakra. Almost half my chakra is sealed in that statue in the timeline we came from. I have enough presence in your body that it anchors us in the present. But you broke that balance. Now it's dragging us back through the rift. Had Kisame planned this? Was this why he had chosen this place to do battle? But Akatsuki didn't know where Naruto had been. The world had given him up for dead. Suddenly, Naruto felt like laughing. Was this just the gods mocking him, messing around with his fate like they had done since his birth? I'm not going anywhere, he said aloud. But when he looked down, he saw that the water was no longer rippling around his feet. This couldn't be happening. He had to stay here. He had to. Naruto's stomach plummeted as he remembered what it was like to wake in the future. What if the next time he opened his eyes, he was in another unrecognizable place? A place without Sasuke, Shikamaru, or Akatsuki, without Sakura and Kazuo? He'd break. He knew it. Uzumaki Naruto would break. He wasn't really watching, but it was hard to miss the sudden stillness in the cave. His clones had been defeated. Kisame was walking towards him, slowly. Maybe he could still be killed in this state. He was still here, wasn't he? You knew this would happen, Naruto found himself thinking dully. I speculated, Kyubi retorted. This cemented my suspicions. He didn't even feel whole enough to be angry. You should have told me, bastard. I would have. What? Quit trying to be a hero. Naruto froze. You'll fight at half your capacity, will you? The demon went on listlessly. You'll break away from the front lines to hide until your chakra returns and do nothing while those ants you so call your precious people fight to keep you alive. You'd do that, wouldn't you? Kisame was drawing nearer. His strides were unhurriedly. He didn't know what had shaken his opponent, but one thing was sure, Uzumaki Naruto was not going anywhere. Naruto didn't feel his knees give way. Shut up, he thought limply. I can't tell what timeline we'll be spat out in. I would think it would take us back to where we came from, but we shot hundreds of years into the future the first time. Worse if those blasted gods interfere. They always hated me. Shut up. Just shut up. Kisame's hand seized Naruto by the jacket and pulled him to his feet. Naruto was dimly surprised that he was still tangible. Now what happened to you? He asked, his voice tiny and far away to Naruto's ears. I was hoping for a bit more fun before Leader got his way with you. Naruto idly stared back into the inky eyes fixed on his pale face. Leader. Pain. Pain would be glad. After 4 years, the last pawn in his plans had shown up on his own and presented itself on a platter. He'd have the rest of the Kyuubi, and whatever sick domination he had in mind would be realized. Too bad Naruto wouldn't be around to congratulate him. Kisame began to drag him across the cave. Something niggled at Naruto's skull. Something felt wrong. He was still here. Would he still be here when they began the extraction process? What would happen then? Or would he be gone? It didn't matter. He could hardly think. He didn't care anymore. Hakushu! The world spun once more. Somewhere above, Kisame was cursing. Naruto fell hard on his back, the impact barely registering anymore. Kisame had released him. Then a desperate cry shattered the insensible haze and Naruto came up as his mind snapped back to the world, his eyes wider than they had ever been. Naruto! Trembling, Naruto lifted his head. Someone was dancing around Kisame, dark hair flying. Bright blue flares of chakra sniped at the irritated man. Hinata! Naruto muttered. With great difficulty, he levered himself up on a trembling elbow. Hinata! Naruto! And she was suddenly in front of him. Are you alright? I can't believe I actually found Dash. Her voice broke off, the hand she'd reached out faltering. What's happening to you? Naruto? She whispered. Her eyes widened, her mouth opened dumbly. Where? She managed to ask, finally. Naruto tried to shrug. Instead, the strength drained from his arm and he fell back to the ground. Hinata reached out to catch him. He fell through her hands. Hinata couldn't breathe. She could feel Kisame coming up behind her. Now he stopped, dumbstruck by what both of them had seen. Uzumaki Naruto had fallen right through her arms. The expression on Hinata's face put a weak smile on Naruto's translucent one. He hadn't seen her since he came back. She had been on a mission, supposedly. At least Kisame wouldn't be the last one to see him. Naruto was glad. He'd be protecting her by fading from this timeline, wouldn't he? He'd take the Kyuubi with him and foil Akatsuki again. His friends would continue fighting the way they had for 4 years, without him. At the end of the day, maybe he wasn't supposed to be here. This wasn't where he belonged. Hey! Hinata? She looked too horrified to cry. Then again, even back in his time, Hinata hadn't cried easily since their genin years, when she had sworn on it during their first Chunin exam. Thinking back widened Naruto's smile. Thanks for finding me. She gave a choked laugh. You're welcome. She knelt down beside him. Her hands shook in her lap. She wanted to touch him, but that wasn't possible. Naruto was leaving. Hinata didn't know what was happening to him. All she knew was that she had been too late to arrive, too late to tell him how glad she was that he was alive, too late to ask him what sort of adventure he'd been on. Too late to touch him, because surely he would shatter into a million fragments if she tried now. He couldn't move anymore. Tell everyone I'm sorry, will you? Especially Shikamaru. I tried to be a hero and screwed up. Biting her lip, Hinata shook her head lightly. I'm sure you did the right thing, she told him. Heh. Oh, and tell Sasuke I'm an idiot. A really big idiot. I will. Darkness was encroaching. And tell everyone I didn't get captured. I'm going to, well, I don't have the right to say I'll protect them, but tell them I didn't lose. No one would believe me even if I said you did. Because he was still alive when they had all thought he was lost. Hinata knew Naruto would continue to live, wherever he went, whatever happened to him. She could barely see him anymore. He was like a vapor. Hinata could hardly breathe. She didn't dare blink. But she dared to do the one thing she thought she'd never be able to. Through the darkness, Naruto heard Hinata's soft voice. His eyes flew open for an instant before he sank into the black oblivion once more. It was enough for him to see the tears shining on Hinata's cheeks. Then he was gone. The cave was utterly silent but for the slow drip of water sliding down Hinata's fingers. Her hand was raised towards the ghostly figure that had been the boy she admired. With a soft splash, she let it trail into the shallow water that she now noticed cloaked the cave floor. Well, well, well. The low voice reminded Hinata that she wasn't alone. Leader won't be happy about this. Hinata's eyes flashed. Naruto was gone, maybe he was never meant to stay in the first place. But for now, she could be irrational for once and blame Akatsuki. They were the ones who had ruined her village, slain her father, and hunted Naruto. If she let Kisame walk away, Hinata knew she would never be able to live with herself even if she had the life to. Slowly, she got to her feet. He won't be finding out through you, she promised the man standing before her. Kisame had been staring transfixed at the spot Naruto had occupied. Now, he glanced at the fire in those pale Byakugan eyes. I have no business with you, Hyuga. Chakra sparked at her fingertips. I'm sorry, but I do. Kisame regarded her. Why not? He didn't want to think about how he was going to explain this to Pain, and this girl was claiming he wouldn't have the chance to. He raised Samahata. You'll die, you know, he told her with a low chuckle. I won't hold back on a girl. Hinata wiped the back of her hand across her wet face as she fell into a tight juken stance. Please don't underestimate me. Sasori of the Red Sand regretted it. A flicker chased through Kisame's dark, predatory eyes. So this was the girl who had brought down Sasori. His thin lips quirked into a smirk. So what did you say to that mouse? He asked conversationally as he stretched his neck. The air grew thick with the weight of his chakra once more. Last-minute love confession? Hinata smiled faintly. Exactly. Leave the dishes to me. Sakura yelped in surprise. The plate in her hand slid back into the soapy water and flushed a minor tsunami over her apron. Distantly, she was glad she was even wearing one. Then she turned around to glare at her father. What kind of doctor tries to give his daughter a heart attack? Kazuo paused in the process of rolling up his sleeves. His eyebrows were raised. I wouldn't know because I wasn't exactly trying, he answered dryly. I did tell you I would clean up while you were cooking. And while we were eating. Oh, and when you picked up the apron. He chuckled at the blank frown on his daughter's face and began to pull the apron over Sakura's head despite her protests. Go to bed, Sakura. I'm not sleepy, she told him, but Kazuo smoothly maneuvered her away from the sink. Sakura knew defeat when she saw it. You haven't done the dishes in years, Dad. You should leave it to the professionals. You exaggerate. I did raise you for 14 years, young lady. Sakura's gaze dropped. Feeling a sudden need to do something, she pulled Kazuo's hands away and tied the apron for him. Anything with knots and her father developed butterfingers, aprons, ties, shoelaces. He was as bad as Naruto. Now she felt the burning urge to say something, anything, to take her mind off what she'd managed to avoid for almost a week. It's already been 14 years, huh? Kazuo picked up the sponge and the plate Sakura had dropped. Surprised? No. I don't really remember her, his daughter murmured. For several minutes, the only sound was the clinking of chinaware. Kazuo was slow with the dishes, scrubbing each twice over before they were allowed on the rack. We can talk if you want, kid, he said. But we both know it'd keep you up tonight. Sakura smiled. It's okay. Staring at her father's back brought a wave of nostalgia. When she was little, it was the only thing she would have her eyes on in a crowd, her tiny hand clenching the tail of his shirt as he cleared a path through the shoving bodies. Now, she was almost as tall as him. She wanted to rest her head against his back and clutch his shirt again, but then Kazuo moved to reach the pot and Sakura had to let him pull away. She felt silly. How old was she? You haven't called me kid longer than you haven't done the dishes, she pointed out instead. Kazuo chuckled. Well, it's been a while since you wanted to be treated like a child. 14 years had imparted Kazuo with a mother's intuition. Then again, Sakura couldn't remember ever being misunderstood by her father. He'd always known her, even when she wasn't so sure herself. It was something she had taken for granted. Resting a hand on his arm, Sakura leaned up and brushed a light kiss on her father's cheek. Good night, Dad. He lightly bumped his head into hers. Sakura was grateful that he didn't try to ruffle her hair with his soapy hands. Sleep tight, kid. Kazuo knew she wouldn't be able to sleep. Some days were just like that. The fact that he'd pushed her to bed anyway was a sign that he was worried. So Sakura obediently went into her room and pulled the blanket over her. Back in elementary school, she would count the cars that drove past her window until it lulled her to sleep. It was a quiet street, and she was usually never got up to 20. Sakura was on 32 when she heard her father retreat into his own room. At 65, the house went still and she knew Kazuo was asleep. She lost count soon after that. Sakura rolled over to face the wall, shutting her eyes. Her mind refused to quieten. She was unusually restless today. Hours of boring holes in textbooks had been fruitless. Sakura didn't understand. It wasn't like she was trying to give herself insomnia. No matter how nervous she got during exam period, this had never happened before. The wall lighted up faintly as another car drove past. Eventually, Sakura sighed and reached behind her, fingers knocking over clocks and keys before they found her phone. She knew she was in trouble when she wasn't even in the mood to tidy her mess. Flipping the phone open, Sakura stared at the bright screen. It almost gave her a headache until she started scrolling through her contacts. The small bar at the top of the screen told her it was almost 3 o'clock. Ino would usually be up at such an unholy hour, but since they had an exam in the morning, Sakura was certain her friend had tucked in well before midnight, burrowing beneath her pillow in self-denial. Whenever she was overwhelmed, Ino simply shut down and slept it off. A small, envious smile tugged at Sakura's lips. She continued down the list even though she knew there was no one she could call, awake or asleep. Still, it offered her a little comfort, and Sakura was beginning to feel a fraction drowsier when Kenjiro came up. Sakura stared at the name, and the number that she knew as well as her own. Ken would be asleep. He never stayed up past midnight. Except when she called him. Then they would stay up trying to bore each other to sleep with off-tune lullabies, newspaper articles, and false snores. Sakura's finger hovered over the green button. Then she snapped the phone shut and closed her eyes. Don't be an idiot, Sakura, she told herself. She gazed at the dim glow on her walls while it slowly sank in that she would never be able to call Ken like that again. He was too kind to turn her down. He would let her indulge in selfishness for a few hours and be a fool, and that was what held Sakura in check. She was a realist, and the one person she couldn't lie to was herself. The light steadily grew brighter. Sakura patiently waited for a large truck of some sort to trundle by. It would probably be number 130. The seconds crawled by, then minutes. Maybe it wasn't a truck, she reasoned absent-mindedly. It wasn't important. Sakura's eyelids were actually beginning to feel a little heavy, enough that she might get an hour or two before her alarm mercilessly went off. At the same time, something was keeping her awake, and it wasn't her thoughts. It was heavy and raw. Sakura wasn't sure if it was a gut feeling or the atmosphere. She only knew that she could feel it, and that it was slowly thickening. She didn't think much of it. At least, until her room burst into blinding light and a forceful gale whipped up from thin air. Sakura didn't scream. In fact, her first instinct was to burrow into her blanket, and it was in the darkness and warmth that she lay curled up with her erratic breathing loud in her ear. The storm ended as quickly as it started. Abruptly, it was quiet. There was a soft thunk as something fell to the carpet. Sakura pictured her clock, knocked over by the strong winds, teetering on the edge of her bedside table before plummeting. Someone moaned. Sakura erupted in a fit of coughs. She'd suddenly forgotten how to swallow, and had wound up choking. Lying utterly still, she waited for Kazuo to crash through the door. Come, she found herself pleading. But what she heard next wasn't her father's anxious call. It was another voice she recognized. Ow. She'd thrown off the blanket before she knew what she was doing. The light on the wall had all but faded, but the sudden shift of shadow told Sakura she had surprised him. She stared at his silhouette, illuminated by the next car that drove by. She didn't know if she should turn around. Her throat was dry. Sakura? She turned around. The first thing she registered was the absolute chaos that was her room. It had been worse last time, but it was a bleeding miracle that Kazuo had not barged in to investigate. The second thing she noticed was his hair. It was too bright to miss. The third was the hand he was wincing at, and the dark blood oozing out of it. Sakura was out of her bed in an instant, her eyes wide. What did you dash? She began, before her foot caught on a French dictionary that had flown off her desk. As she fell forward, the absolute horror on his face was all she saw. That, and the arms he had automatically raised. They crashed to the floor. The top of her head knocked into his chin, and they both flinched. Ow! In the next room, Kazuo grumbled in his sleep. The two of them were still as stone apart from their rapid breathing. Sakura was gulping in quick, shallow breaths. She knew he was, too, because the chest on which she was sprawled across rose just as quickly as her own. Another car. Light on the wall. He was warm beneath her, solid. Real. Sakura sucked in a large breath. Am I heavy? A little. His breath fluttered by her ear. But you can stay there. I don't mind. She suddenly wanted to pinch him. She did. He didn't disappear. Hey, what was that for? For calling me fat. She lied. I did not say that. He squirmed beneath her. Sakura shifted so that she didn't have her elbow in his diaphragm. For a long moment, they just lay there, side by side on the floor amidst a mess of books and furniture. It took several more moments for Sakura to find the voice to ask. Naruto? Is your hand okay? Yeah, I guess. He paused. His breaths became slow and deep. I'm probably staining your carpet, though. She couldn't help but laugh, at his befuddling priorities, at the situation, at the way they pretended he'd only forgotten his keys and climbed through her window for the umpteenth time. You can explain that to my dad. He laughed too. It sounded forced. You're not going to ask me how I got hurt? At this, Sakura shuffled self-consciously. Her head was on his shoulder, and she closed her eyes with a sigh. I want to ask a lot more than that, idiot. I want to know why you're in a lady's room without invitation. Sorry. I swear it's not my fault. And I want to know what happened to you. Why did you leave? This wasn't his home. He had never been obligated to stay. Sakura shook her head. Where the hell did you go? She demanded. Silence. Either of them breathed. Then Naruto's arms were around her, squeezing her to his chest. As soon as the shock broke through, she struggled to push away, but he held her fast and easily. It didn't quell the panic rising in Sakura's chest, and she continued to beat at him until she realized he was trembling. Slowly, her hands unclenched, and she let him bury his face in her hair. He didn't do anything more. Eventually, she relaxed into his embrace and closed her eyes. She didn't realize she had been softly hushing him until he gradually stopped shaking. Lying there, the only thing louder than his breathing was the rumble of tires on asphalt. Sakura began to count. She didn't remember reaching 14. Chapter 7, Never Meant to Fail. Her bed was unusually hard today. Not to mention that when her alarm broke into her drowsy thoughts with its shrill cry, it was not the bedside table that her searching fingers found. Also, where was her blanket? Sakura frowned and blinked blearily, rubbing at her tired eyes. I'm sleeping on the floor, she realized vaguely. A second later, she bolted upright. The disarray of her belongings strewn chaotically across her room brought back the early hours of the morning in scrambled snippets. As green eyes widened, Sakura grasped that the confused panic rising in her chest had nothing to do with where she had been sleeping. She was alone. Calm down, she ordered herself. The apocalyptic state of her room was proof that she hadn't just woken from a ridiculously far-fetched dream. She couldn't tell if she was relieved or glad about that. Still, Sakura's heart was beating faster than normal as she picked herself off the floor and followed the sounds of running water. She couldn't help but sigh when she reached the bathroom. Seeing him standing there, ruffled and bedheaded, flooded her with overwhelming relief. She had only just taken in his red hand in the sink when he noticed her, his head snapping around with frightening speed. When he saw her lingering at the doorway, the caution flushed from his face while his features broke into a sheepish grin. Sakura tentatively smiled back. Morning. Naruto jerked his head. Your alarm is still going. So it was. I'll be right back. Quickly silencing her clock, which had somehow been swept beneath her bed, Sakura found herself rummaging through the storage cabinet downstairs. She felt weirdly rushed. After nearly sending an entire shelf avalanching on her head, Sakura forced herself to slow down. Naruto wasn't going anywhere, she assured herself, and abruptly derailed her thoughts before she could doubt herself. Naruto was hissing at the cold water that seeped into his open wound when Sakura returned. He was so absorbed that he jumped slightly when she leaned in. She almost flinched at his wound. Wow, it's swollen. It's nothing. I've had heaps worse before, Naruto said unthinkingly. Then he stiffened. After a pause, Sakura murmured softly. Have you now? Naruto grimaced. What an idiot, he berated himself. There was nothing he could do but nod hesitantly. But Sakura didn't ask, only wordlessly reached for his hand. She gently mopped it dry, and then opened the first aid box to come up with a disinfectant spray. Naruto watched her face carefully as she treated him. He was grateful that Sakura didn't press for answers, but the longer the silence dragged on, the guiltier he felt. Sakura, I dash. Without warning, Sakura pulled tightly on the bandage she had wrapped around his palm. Naruto yelped in protest. Oops. Sorry, she said absently, but the apologetic smile she flashed him fell flat. Naruto thought he saw her eyes darken before they shifted back to his hand. Several moments passed before Sakura spoke up again. Naruto? He tilted his head to show he was listening. Sakura bit her lip. I'll listen if you want to talk, but if you don't, I'd rather not know. She peered up at him. Do you understand what I'm saying? He did. She was scared. At that moment, Naruto realized that he was too. So he just nodded. I understand. Sakura smiled, and just like that it was like nothing had happened between them. I wonder if Dad is up yet? She wondered, casually changing the subject. Naruto knew the answer to that one. He'd checked earlier. Oh, he's gone. Sakura's hand stopped. Gone? She echoed. Naruto began to nod bemusedly before his lack of tact hit him. He hastily backtracked. Not gone. He's still here but not here. What I mean is dash. Kami, he was terrible at this. Naruto continued to trip over his incoherent words, trepidation quickly skyrocketing. He was on the verge of pulling his hair when Sakura finally took pity on him. He went to work, right? Naruto snapped his fingers like she'd won the jackpot, and his face cleared with a large grin at his own stupidity. Sakura chuckled. She wouldn't tell Ino, but she had missed Uzumaki Naruto. Baka! She teased him. His grin widened impossibly. Shaking her head, Sakura tied the last knot. How's that? She asked him. Naruto ran a finger along the bandage, closing his hand into a loose fist. It reminded him of almost being run over by Kazuo's car all those weeks ago and following the man home to immediately be pegged a pervert by his daughter. Sakura had fixed his bandage back then, too. Thanks. She packed away the box. I think you should still get my dad to take a look at it later. It looks bad, she finished hesitantly. It looked more than bad. The torn flesh was chopped, uneven and ragged, like a dozen blades had sawn at it. Sakura was glad Naruto had cleaned it himself. The blood might have been enough to bring up her non-existent breakfast. Trying to distract herself from the gory image, Sakura added, Dad probably knows you're here. He always comes into my room when he gets called to the hospital in the middle of the night. Naruto pulled a face. It was just like Kazuo to not say anything. Any other parent would be threatening with bodily harm if they found their daughter lying on the floor of her post-hurricane room with a boy who had vanished without a trace. Suddenly Naruto paled. He hoped Sakura hadn't. Of course, one look at his expression and she was on to him. Her fist made solid contact with his face. Naruto staggered backwards into the bathtub and flailed wildly for a second before falling bottom first into it. He gaped at Sakura's livid expression, red with mortification. You were thinking perverted thoughts, weren't you? She huffed. About us and ugh. You are going to tell Dad that there is nothing between us. Okay? Nothing. Naruto could only nod frantically. Survival instincts told him to withhold the surprise that came with realizing the overwhelmingly normal girl in front of him packed a punch comparable to Chunin. Sakura ought to meet Tsunade, although it might be better for Naruto if she didn't. Don't you have school? He pointed out weakly. Sakura froze. School. French exam. That she had hardly been able to study for. Oh no, crap! Naruto released out a relieved breath when Sakura rushed out of the bathroom. He waited until she was in her room, digging through her scattered belongings. Then he pulled himself from the tub and patted himself down. He paused to sniff at his sleeve. His clothes were still damp and held the salty tang of sweat. Naruto wrinkled his nose. He was crossing the landing into the study without a thought. He opened the door and stopped. His room was exactly the same. Naruto's mind went blank for several moments. For some reason, the familiar sight of his clothes haphazardly thrown all over the place floored him. Not looking away, Naruto found his voice to shout. Sakura, how long was I gone? The loud noises coming from Sakura's room faltered. She slowly straightened, half-packed bag in hand. Her eyes were downcast. So Naruto didn't know how long he had been away. It didn't sound like he had simply forgotten. Forcing the thought to the back of her mind, Sakura banished the uncertainty from her voice and called back. Almost 2 months, I guess. Naruto's lungs resumed their function once more. For a moment he had feared that years had flown by. He couldn't believe he hadn't even considered how much time had passed until now. It was silly now that he thought about it. Sakura hadn't changed at all and she had accepted him as if he had only been missing for a few nights. Then again, Naruto recalled she had welcomed him into her household without inhibition even when they had been strangers. That memorable day seemed lifetimes ago. 2 months. Naruto looked back at the study. It had only been his temporary sleeping quarters, and yet the Harunos had kept it exactly as he'd left it. He could see that someone, probably Sakura, had attempted to tidy up his mess, tucking in drawers and folding up his blanket. Kazuo's pot plant by the window was still alive, too. It had even grown taller. Otherwise, nothing had changed. Naruto walked over and picked a spare shirt off the floor. Had Kazuo and Sakura expected him to return? No way. He chuckled to himself, just to hear it the logic. But Naruto knew that they would do just that. They would believe in him when he wasn't so sure himself. It reminded him of the unwavering faith his friends had in him even when he failed them. Somewhere along the way, Kazuo and Sakura had broken down the walls between strangers. He didn't know how his hosts felt, but to Naruto, they were as good as family. The jeans and polo shirt hugged him almost as comfortably as his hardy trousers and jounin vest. Naruto folded the latter two and tucked them away into a drawer. Along with the weapons pouch, he was unspeakably relieved that Sakura had not noticed. They belonged in this world even less than he did, but having them on hand still gave him a little comfort. Just in case. Glancing into her room, Naruto could see Sakura mumbling to herself with a thick book open in her hand. He cocked his head. Maybe she had a quiz or something. If he'd studied nearly as hard as she did, Irika-sensei might have picked on him less. A sad smile flickered across Naruto's face as he turned towards the stairs. Too late for regrets now. When Sakura came downstairs, the first thing she spotted was Naruto in a familiar paw-printed apron. The second was the platter of toast on the counter. The fact that they were already spread with strawberry jam told Sakura that they were meant for her. Naruto glanced at the wall clock. "You're going to be late. You know, just saying." "Mao." Sakura groaned around the warm bread. "I'll run." She wasn't on the track team for nothing. In fact, this was why she was on the team. She had convinced Kazuo to stop dropping her off once she entered middle school. Her father was tardier than she was, in the same way the hospital was on the other side of town to her school. She was ready to dash out the front door, French verbs ricocheting off her skull, when Naruto stuck a wrapped lunchbox in front of her nose. For several seconds, Sakura just blinked at it. Naruto was grinning. "Didn't have time, so I made you an Uzumaki sandwich. Stuffed with every edible ingredient I could get my hands on," he explained at her quizzical raised eyebrows. "Very nutritional." Sakura took the offer with a dollop of skepticism. She was well aware of Naruto's eccentric cooking. At least it had never given her a stomach ache, yet. She carefully tucked the box into her bag. "I'll tell you what it tastes like when I get back," she told him. "I say banana. Because I used a lot of them." Banana. She didn't really want to know. Sakura stopped with her hand on the door. She looked over her shoulder, meeting Naruto's eyes. She knew it was stupid, but she had already blurted the question without thought. "You'll still be here, right?" Naruto's smile slipped, but only for a fraction of a second. Not missing a beat, he flashed her a thumbs up. "Definitely," he assured confidently. "You haven't seen the last of this handsome face." Sakura snorted, but her expression cleared. "I'll see you later then, Mr. Ego." Naruto waved until she was out of sight. Which didn't take long. Sakura ran fast. Later, as he leaned on the counter with half-bitten toast in his mouth, Naruto realized that it had been a long time since he had last been alone in this house. Even before his voyage, he had spent school hours working at the Yamanaka's flower shop. Those were normal days, the kind that had replaced what Naruto had previously deemed routine. During the first weeks of his stay, Naruto had jolted awake at odd hours, automatically reaching for a non-existent kunai. Even in the safety of his village, his paranoia of waking in enemy territory, in Akatsuki's hands, had plagued his sleep. He'd painstakingly weaned himself off it, but the restless hours had returned far too easily when Naruto had woken in Suna. The few hours he had managed on the floor, gripping Sakura like a life ring, was the most soundly he'd slept since then. God, he was pathetic. Fresh air, that was what he needed. Nodding to no one in particular, Naruto scrubbed down his plate, and was already halfway to the door before he stopped. Keys, he thought. Back in Konoha, they'd stopped locking doors when it became obvious that thievery was the least of their problems. Most shinobi got by with simple warning seals as defensive alarms. But this was not Konoha. The last time Naruto had forgotten his keys, Sakura had punished him by locking him out and slowly devouring the last cup of instant ramen on the other side of the door. He'd been shocked, to say the least. Sometimes he forgot that Sakura was a teenager like him. Now, Naruto impatiently dug through his room as he tried to remember if he'd left them in a pair of pants somewhere. No metallic clinking from any of the trousers piled in the corner. Trying the desk, he peered around the rectangular thing they called a computer and felt around to see if the keys had fallen to the back. Nothing. He was seriously contemplating whether he should just leave a window open for the return trip when his hand knocked into them. Naruto looked down. They had been there all along, sitting in the middle of the desk like they were waiting for him. Like someone had rummaged through his unwashed clothes knowing he would do the same thing. The keys rested on a yellow post-it note. "Don't disappear like that again. Sakura was worried about you." For a long moment, Naruto continued to stare uncomprehendingly at the note. His eyes ran over the slanted scrawl again. Kazuo's handwriting was horrid. He left his letters half-formed, pen trailing into obscure squiggles that were neither here nor there. It was worse than Jiraiya's. Naruto found himself chuckling at the likeness, shaking his head as he pressed the heel of his palm into the sharp sting behind his eye. Naruto's face twisted as everything that had happened slammed into him like a battering ram keen to see him fall. He wondered what Jiraiya had been thinking before he died, if he'd had any regrets. Had he sighed wearily at how lame his apprentice was, failing when he was never supposed to? Naruto had wanted the old pervert to see him rise to Hokage, but that was alright though, wasn't it? At this rate, Jiraiya wouldn't be missing out on much. Naruto swallowed the thick lump in his throat. He wondered if the Leaf Village would be rebuilt again. Shikamaru would make a great Hokage, but he would refuse. His lazy friend's lifelong ambition was to live a regular, unremarkable life, and becoming the first crippled Kage would make his life endlessly troublesome. Sasuke's heart was in the right place now, but he detested leadership, and the council would never sanction a former turncoat. Naruto idly considered his friends, trying to picture each one in the red hat and white robes. He couldn't get past Hinata. "You taught me so many things, Naruto. You taught me to believe, to never give up, to stay true to myself. So I'm not afraid to say that Hyuga Hinata has always loved you. It's funny, isn't it, saying it now? But you also taught me. Better late than never," Naruto said aloud, softly. He wished he could tell Hinata that he'd heard her, that she was an irreplaceably important friend, a sister. He wished he could have the chance to thank her, to find out if some deep, clueless part of him actually reciprocated her feelings. He wished that next time, she would choose someone who could stay to do all those things. Naruto closed his eyes and sucked in a shuddering breath as it hit him that he would never see Hinata, or any of his friends again. Not the ones from that timeline, who had fought 4 years without him and had made Suna their home. If ever. Something niggled at the back of Naruto's mind. That he had managed to return to Sakura's time, only months apart, was too much of a coincidence. He tried to remember what the Nine Tails had said, but his mind refused to be still. The only thing Naruto knew was that he would be safely grounded to this time if he didn't use his chakra, and why should he, when there was no need to? When there was no reason to? When he didn't want to? Suddenly, Naruto was furious with himself. He was frustrated by the pettish tears that made his vision swim, but what he hated most was the realization that, all this time, he'd been avoiding the simple reality that he'd begun regretting the Rasengan he formed back then. If he hadn't done that, he wouldn't be so painfully guilty about letting the sheltered life here spoil him. If he hadn't done that, he could still hide behind the excuse that he had no choice. Wasn't there anything he could do to let him forgive himself? Kazuo's note was crushed in Naruto's fist. He opened his fingers and tried to see the crumpled letters through the watery blur, but then he blinked and the hot tears rushed down his cheeks. "Don't disappear like that again." "Damn it!" Naruto choked out, squeezing his eyes shut. "Damn it!" "Pens down," their bald, double-chinned teacher said in his aristocratic accent. Ino obliged all too eagerly. She pushed her exam paper away from her and arched over the back of her chair in a feline stretch. Her long arms came a bit too close to Sakura's face, seated behind her, and Ino's knee thumped painfully into her desk as her friend kicked her chair. Somewhere to their left, Ken snickered. It took far too long for their papers to be collected. The school was almost empty by the time their class spilled into the hallways. Once outside, Ino stretched again, properly, and sighed appreciatively. Freedom never tasted so good. Ken and Sakura, as usual, were discussing the exam behind her. Ino never listened in. Too many times she had left an exam confident in AB to discover otherwise 5 minutes out the door. Ken and Sakura, whose marks only fluctuated between A and A+, could completely dissect the exam before they reached the school gates and still have more to say about the strange wording of question 34 on the walk home. Ino glanced back at her friends now. It was just the 3 of them today. Yumi didn't do French. She tried to remember how long it had been since they had walked down the same streets they had chased each other down since they were 5 years old. The extended response was weird. 2-page recount of the happiest moment in your life. In French. What did you? Ken's incredulous tone trailed off into raised eyebrows as he snapped his fingers in front of Sakura's vacant gaze. Jolting back, she automatically punched him in the shoulder. He knew she hated him doing that. Someone's being an airhead, he teased. Now this was a conversation Ino felt she could safely engage in. She spun around. Haven't you noticed? Sakura's been an airhead for weeks, Ken. She countered Sakura's glare with a smirk. You know it's true. In my defense, it is exam period. It was exam period, Ken corrected. Which means we have tennis today. Sakura stopped, blinking. She looked over her shoulder for what she knew wasn't there. Crap, I completely forgot. She groaned. I don't have my racket today. Airhead. Ino felt her point was proven. Just borrow one from storage. Kimura-senpai might smoke us if we don't show up. Ken was always the good friend. Sakura nodded slowly. I should. She mused, and then hesitated. Ino wondered at the strange emotion that flickered through her friend's eyes. It wasn't quite fear, milder somehow, but urgent enough that Ino knew tennis practice was the last thing the pink-haired girl was up for. But because she was Sakura, personal issues came second. Let's go dash. To the hospital? Yes, let's. All eyes swiveled to Ino, who was looking pointedly at Sakura's blank face. Your dad needs you to bring an important file to him, remember? Dear Lord, amnesia must run in the family. And me, Ino? Who was grinning at Ken's quirked eyebrows. He shook his head wryly. They'd both known Haruno Sakura long enough that they could read her like a book. Ino didn't like to think that Ken had become slower on the uptake, but what mattered was that they were on the same page now. I'll tell Senpai you had an emergency. He grinned. Awesome. Kimura owes me a favor anyway. Ino grabbed Sakura's hand, skillfully ignoring her protests. See you tomorrow, Ken. She knew her intuition hadn't been wrong when Sakura only struggled half-heartedly as she was pulled towards the gate. After Ken was gone, Ino let her go and Sakura frowned. What was that about? Are you going to tell me? Tell you what? Ino rolled her eyes. You've been spacey ever since Loverbud disappeared. But today, you're a different kind of spacey. You're in a suspiciously good mood. Except every now and then you remember something that makes you tune out of everything around you. She gave her companion a look. So talk. Sakura really hated how perceptive her best friend was sometimes. Trust Ino to notice what Sakura wasn't even aware of herself. Look, I'm glad you got me out of tennis dash. See? You're hiding something. Sakura groaned inwardly as she adjusted her bag. At least they were almost at the gates. She'd have to shake Ino off quickly, or she might end up at a cafe somewhere getting interrogated by the blonde girl. I'm not hiding anything. I've just got something on my mind. You're like that too sometimes, hypocrite. Sometimes is when I'm crushing on a guy, going out with a guy, or breaking up with a guy. Ino replied unhesitatingly, raising 3 fingers. In your case, it's usually the last one, but since you barely noticed Ken at all, I'm going to say that post-breakup depression is out today. So, she concluded, if you insist on using me as an example, then you are in love. Sakura had been shaking her head in disbelief the entire time. At Ino's last words, she stopped to stare dumbfounded at the other girl, not because she was right, but because Ino's logic, usually so frustratingly insightful, sounded incredibly silly to her right now. I don't love him, dash. Sakura sighed exasperatedly. I knew it. Ino crowed. There is a guy involved. I'm worried about him, you pig. There's a difference. Who's a worrisome pig? And at the curious voice, both girls' minds immediately emptied of everything but the tall blonde boy who had been waiting outside the school gates. What are you doing here? Sakura blurted, just as Ino gawked. Loverbu? Where the hell did you come from? Naruto blinked and bemusedly scratched his head. I thought I'd pick you up. You know, like usual, he said to Sakura. When she continued to stare at him, he looked over at Ino. And I don't really know how to answer your question. Thankfully, Ino didn't look deeply into his response. She was more concerned about other matters. Her expression scandalous, she rounded on Sakura while her finger jabbed into Naruto's chest. You kept him a secret? Sakura groaned inwardly at the confusion on Naruto's face. I've got this, she told him before he could ask. She turned back to Ino. He came back this morning, okay? I just haven't had the chance to tell you. Ino looked dubious. She would have pressed on if it weren't for the slight inflection she heard in Sakura's tone, as if she didn't want to go there. Ino sighed. Being friends with this girl was harder than any school exam. Shaking her head, she looked over at Naruto. Fine, I'll believe forehead. But you, mister, you are going to tell me what in the world you were thinking when you vanished without saying anything. She narrowed her eyes. Are you in trouble with the police? Naruto looked appalled. Ino nodded thoughtfully before he could even answer. Thought as much. You don't look shady. Sakura was also watching Naruto. She'd be lying if she said she didn't want to hear him explain himself. But some part of her urged her to grab Naruto and get both of them away from Ino, who was asking all the questions Sakura should. Before she could make up her mind, Naruto laughed softly. I guess I was a bit homesick. Homesick? Sakura echoed in spite of herself, and he smiled sheepishly. That was how she knew that even though he was far from telling them the truth, he wasn't lying. So homesick that you didn't even think to leave a note for Sakura and her dad? Ino questioned suspiciously. If I'd had to chance to, I swear I would have done it, Naruto said solemnly. He glanced at Sakura, looking so regretful she wondered if he knew how afraid she had been for him. Ino sighed as if she was exasperatedly with her 2 companions. They were hiding things, But Ino had always been conscious of the line between what she should know and what she couldn't. Well, you're going to need to come up with a better excuse. She smirked at Naruto's frown. My dad won't let you back into the shop without one. Naruto blinked, taking several moments to process what he had heard. Boss will still want me. Why are you so surprised? You were actually really helpful, you know. You're the best delivery boy we've had. Why was he surprised? Because it had happened again. Sakura, Kazuo, Ino, they had reaccepted him so quickly and easily. Naruto felt terrible that the only thing he could do to repay them was to let them be incurably kind to him. Ino swung her bag over one shoulder. Drop by tomorrow morning, alright? She grinned mischievously. Dad values my opinion highly. If you rub my back, I'll rub yours. If you know what I mean. Sakura rolled her eyes, but Naruto took her seriously in that childishly gullible way of his. I'll make you a bento, he offered eagerly. So Naruto was the reason Sakura had had homemade lunch today, for the first time since Naruto had disappeared. Ino smiled wryly to herself. She'd missed that. The gesture would have meant so much more if Naruto and Sakura weren't both the type to selflessly help whoever they could. Ino considered herself an expert in relationships. For the first time, though, she couldn't see what kind of road Naruto and Sakura were heading towards. Friendship or more, she couldn't tell. She had never met a pair like them. Still, she would never tire of teasing them. I'll let you two have your personal time, Ino said impishly. Turning away from Sakura's exasperated expression, she bumped Naruto on the shoulder. I'm glad you're back, Naruto. But if you make Sakura worry like that again, I will personally make sure you die childless. Got that? Suddenly, Sakura was nodding in agreement. Naruto paled. The best thing about Naruto was that with him, silence was never awkward. He had a way of entertaining himself, humming quietly or casually trying not to step on the cracks in the footpath. Sakura was content to let him walk half a step ahead of her, swinging her bag around as he hopped on ledges along the way. Naruto had always been cheerful, but today, he seemed particularly animated, as if he was trying to embrace everything around him. He acted the complete opposite to Sakura, who for some reason felt that it had only been yesterday that they last walked down this path. She looked at him now, gazing thoughtfully at his broad back. She felt she should say something, because no matter how hard she tried, it just wasn't possible to pretend that he hadn't just appeared in her room after an equally mysterious disappearance. But right now, listening to Naruto's off-tune humming, Sakura didn't want to break the moment. Right now, it was just another day. When Naruto jumped ahead to the next crossing, Sakura found herself reaching out to hold him back by the shirt. Let's go this way today, she said with a small smile. He blinked for a moment, and then grinned easily. The harbor was tranquil as always. At this time of day, most people simply passed without stopping, on their way home. Sakura went over the edge, leaning over the silver rail. She gestured Naruto over, and pointed across the water at the other side of town. Do you see that big hole in the ground over there? They cleared the land there while you were gone. A new mall is going to be built there. Bigger than the mall we usually go to? Naruto asked curiously. Bigger. Heaps bigger. Sakura chuckled when his eyes widened. She remembered how easily the mall's size had astonished Naruto. They haven't even started scaffolding though, so it'll be a few years before it opens. Naruto's gaze grew distant. Where would he be in a few years? He couldn't really stay with the Harunos for that long, could he? It would be wrong to. Maybe he would find a place to live in this town, or set out to see more of this strange world. Or maybe, if fate hated him that much, he wouldn't even be here anymore. An uncomfortable weight settled on his chest. Think about something else, Naruto told himself for the umpteenth time. If he went on like this, Sakura would notice, and she would be concerned again. With that thought in mind, Naruto nodded to himself, plastered a smile on his face, and turned, and that was when he realized that Sakura was not by his side. He whirled around, startled and tense. He couldn't help the instinctive dread that leaped at him. The adrenaline still tingling from his battle with Kisame buzzed and refused to settle. Chocolate or vanilla? And just like that, Sakura was there, waving 2 ice cream cones in his face. Naruto's relieved breath whistled through his lips. He felt like a melodramatic idiot now. Being thrust back into the past had changed him. Chocolate is the best. He grinned, reaching for it. Thanks. I say vanilla easily trumps chocolate, Sakura retorted. Yuck, it's tasteless. It just has a very subtle taste. Unconvinced, Naruto took a huge bite out of his ice cream. Sakura pointed at his brown-smeared lips. See? That's why you can't appreciate vanilla. You don't even stop to taste it. Let it melt in your mouth and you'll love it. He made a face. Nah. Chocolate has really good flavor, you know. It explodes in your mouth the moment it hits your tongue. It's number one, hands down. Sakura rolled her eyes. Trust me, I've tried dozens of flavors and there are plenty heaps better than chocolate. I'm starting to think you hate every flavor that isn't chocolate. I only eat chocolate, Naruto boasted. It didn't really have the impressive effect he had been going for. What, so you haven't even tried anything else? Sakura was shocked. Why did you say vanilla was tasteless then? A friend of mine told me. Jiraiya had sworn it on every single one of his best-selling novels. Vanilla, he insisted, was like a porn magazine filled with thickly dressed models whose last intention was to flash even one shred of their voluptuous bodies. Sakura shook her head disbelievingly. She held her ice cream out to him. Trust me, you're missing out. Try it. Then you can hate it. Naruto eyed it dubiously. Fine, he decided finally. He leaned forward, mouth poised over the milky scoop. At the last moment, he paused and his eyes flickered up to Sakura's. Sure? He asked. He remembered the kind of conclusions she could jump to just by considering that she had once lent him her pajamas. Sakura rolled her eyes again. No, I won't smack you into the water for trying to give me an indirect kiss, okay? She, Ino, and Ken had been sharing lunches since elementary school. Looking back, that probably explained why all three of them were always sick at the same time. Naruto took a bite. Sakura watched him expectantly. Don't just swallow it immediately, she warned, and he almost choked. Of course, he had done just that, and she had to let him have another bite. Well? She prompted when Naruto's expression turned contemplative. He licked his lips. It's not tasteless, he concluded finally. But I still say chocolate is way better. Well, at least she tried. I'll show you some really good flavors another time. You'll jump ship immediately. Naruto puffed up his chest. Bring it. Her ice cream had a tinge of sweet chocolate in it. Sakura tasted it thoughtfully as she watched Naruto from the corner of his eye. He looked happier now. It was still slightly forced at the edges, and it didn't change the fact that the first thing Sakura had noticed about him was his tired eyes, which told her he had been crying. But at least he wasn't the shivering boy who had clung to her like she was the only thing anchoring him to sanity. Sakura didn't want to see Naruto like that ever again, not if she could help it. A crisp crunch told her that Naruto had finished his ice cream and was licking his fingers. Sakura was only halfway through hers. They fell into companionable silence while she ate. Naruto began to whistle. You can do whatever you want, you know, she told him after a long moment. He looked questioningly at her. Sakura bit into her cone to stall. If you're sad, you should let it out. I won't stop you. It took several seconds for Naruto to catch on. The first time they had walked through the harbor together, he had yelled his throat hoarse, pouring everything that weighed him down into the ocean. This time, he probably needed to vent even more than that. It wasn't a bad idea. But then the wind picked up momentarily and Sakura's long hair brushed against his arm, making him look down at her. She thought she didn't know how to help him in any way except to give him the space to help himself. Naruto felt himself smile. Sakura was one of the most intelligent people he knew, but she was unbelievably short-sighted when it came to herself. He shifted so that his broad back shielded her from the breeze. Chocolate is the best, taste and medicine-wise, Naruto grinned. Cheered me right up. She looked into his eyes and smiled sadly. She didn't look away as she said, Liar. Naruto frowned. I am not. That ice cream really helped. Sakura shook her head. You're lying to yourself? Naruto, you're not okay. Trying to pretend that you are won't change that. The playfulness in his eyes faded away. Then what do you want me to do? Faintly, he recognized the signs of his rising temper, fueled by suppressed frustration. He tried to stifle it. He shouldn't be angry, not at Sakura. It didn't help that her emerald eyes were blazing with a fierceness that made it clear that this was what she really wanted to say, and that she was no longer in the mind to care if it was the right decision. Get it off your chest. Confront it. You said you didn't want to know, he pointed out. Accusation? It was uncontrollable. I don't, Sakura shot back. She was getting riled too, determined to see it to the end. But I said that if you wanted to talk, I'd be there to listen. If you don't want to hear it, why should you? Because I want to help you. I don't want to see you like this. Well, you can't understand why I'm upset without hearing what I went through. Which would upset you? He pointed out. He was biting out each word, the same way her voice was rising. They were attracting curious glances, but neither of them cared. Yes, it will upset me, but dash. Then you're lying to yourself too, aren't you? You don't want to know what's wrong. I know that. Fine, I'll be honest then. Sakura threw up a hand. I'm confused, worried, and I don't know what I want to hear. I'm scared. Does that satisfy you? Guess what? I feel the exact same way. Naruto gripped the rail, cold and hard. He tried to control himself. You don't want to hear what I've been through, Sakura. Let it go. Let it go, she repeated. You can't possibly believe that letting go will change what I already know. Do you know how dash? You don't know anything. I know that you're not normal. A sudden silence dropped over them like a bucket of ice water. Naruto's next outburst died in his throat. He was hunched over the railing, squeezing it so hard his entire frame was rigid. Sakura turned her face away from him, biting her lip. Her ice cream had begun to melt in her hand. Either of them spoke, eyes fixed on the water or the concrete. A dull hollowness ate into Naruto's gut. He was sorry he'd let his temper get the better of him. He wanted to apologize and put it behind them, but something chained him, something that left Sakura's words echoing loudly in his head. Because she was right, he wanted to talk to someone. He wanted to believe Shikamaru and stop trying to shoulder everything on his own. The only person he could confide in was Sakura. But he didn't want to scare her away. He hadn't realized he already had. He heard her inhale a deep breath. She still wasn't looking at him. Quietly, she said, I saw you, Naruto. You dropped out of thin air and blasted my room into chaos. I saw you. She closed her eyes. Normal people don't do that. That depends, he murmured. I'm normal where I'm from. Mostly, anyway. Sakura smiled faintly. That's what I don't want to know. I want to keep pretending that you're just a regular boy, Naruto. I don't want to risk the chance that I'll never be able to look at you the same way. She lowered her eyes. But seeing you like that this morning, you snapped. That scared me more than the fear of ruining our friendship. So if you want to talk, I will listen. Naruto stared into Sakura's passionate gaze. She really was scared, cringing away deep inside. Yet she was standing next to him, so close even though they were worlds apart. Guilt ripped into Naruto as his eyes softened. It doesn't work that way for me, Sakura, he said. He smiled slightly. I'd rather snap than lose a friend. They were both stubborn people. It takes one to know one, Sakura mused. I'm not saying that hearing your side of the story will make me abandon you. You're not a bad person, Naruto. It's just, if I can help it, I don't dash. Want to change the way things are? Naruto finished. He felt the same. Sasuke had taught him what it was like to lose sight of your friends. They were silent again. Sakura slowly finished her ice cream. She had vanilla all over her fingers and Naruto took a short trip to the ice cream stand to bring over some napkins. After she finished her ice cream, the two of them continued to stare into the ocean. Naruto distantly watched an upturned beer bottle bobbing in the water. Have you ever moved houses, Sakura? Once, but I don't remember it. I was 3. Oh. Lucky you. Sakura glanced sideways at him. You moved away from your home then? More or less. I didn't want to move though. It just happened. Naruto chuckled at that. Just happened indeed. I'd lived in the same place my whole life. It's just a village, nothing like the towns here. When I was little, lots of people hated me and I really wanted to run away sometimes, but I stayed because I had nowhere else to go. It was home. I wanted people to respect me, so I promised myself that one day, I'd be the village's hero, protecting everyone. Sakura gave a small smile. It was a typical child's dream. Those were the ones that stayed with you. But, she said gently, because she knew it was coming. But, Naruto said slowly, I went back and it turns out my home got destroyed while I was gone. Destroyed. Sakura was going to ask before she recalled that, a long time ago, Naruto had said his home was in the middle of a war. She lowered her head. Suddenly, she felt a strange distance between the two of them. When they had met, he had been nothing but another boy to her. Even when he had climbed in through her 2-story window, Sakura hadn't suspected that they could be so different. Naruto's shoulder nudged into hers. Are you trying to look sad enough for both of us? He joked. I don't think that's even possible. Sakura looked sadly at him. At the end of the day, I'm not you. I don't know how you feel and pretending that I do is even worse. But you can listen, right? He smiled. Naruto shrugged. You know, I think it's the people that makes a place feel like home. My village was gone but the people who survived moved into another village. My friends were safe too. I was happy, really, really happy. So what's the problem? Sakura asked lightly. The problem was that Naruto didn't really know what it was himself. He told Sasuke he had changed, But that didn't excuse the sheer isolation he'd felt in Suna. The relief he'd felt when he realized he was back in Sakura's bedroom made Naruto feel overwhelmingly guilty, as if he had betrayed his friends. "Let's skip the problem," Naruto said quickly. "I can't try to explain it without saying stuff you don't, you know." She couldn't ask for more. After all, they were trying to stay in the middle ground where both of them could understand each other. "I'm sorry." When he looked confused, Sakura added, "Because I can't relate to what you went through." Naruto looked at her. "You really don't want to, Sakura," he told her gently. For some reason, that made her wince. Sakura was beginning to think that this wasn't fair. The two of them were both the same age, and yet Naruto seemed to have baggage even adults wouldn't have to carry. That thought alone was enough to make her lift her head and look her companion in the eye. "Try me." It wasn't hard to tell when Sakura was serious. Naruto grimaced. She could say it so easily, but he knew neither of them wanted her to hear about what it was like to look at a crying child and feel as if you had hurt her yourself and had no right to hold her. "Did you lose anyone close to you?" Sakura prompted softly, sensing his hesitance. It was among one of the most tactless questions she had ever asked. It was Ino who had taught her that sometimes, insensitivity was the only way to open someone up. Naruto stiffened. "A few," he managed to reply after a pause. Sakura looked sorry she'd asked, but her eyes didn't leave his face. Naruto took a deep breath. "When I went back, there was someone I really wanted to talk to. He was like a father to me, pretty silly sometimes but very reliable." He released a breath, a long sigh. "He wasn't around for me to talk to anymore." A small warmth on his skin, Sakura was squeezing his arm. Naruto shrugged and smiled, even though it didn't quite reach his eyes. What was it like, Sakura wondered, to smile more easily for another's benefit than for your own? "You've lost someone close to you, too?" he ended up asking. Sakura paused as if to think. "Technically, yes." She shook her head. "Sorry, Naruto, I asked a stupid question. I asked you about something I can only imagine." Naruto cocked his head. "I don't get it." It was difficult to tell if he was genuinely curious, or if he simply wanted to change the topic. Either way, Sakura knew she wasn't going to get anything more out of Naruto. She was torn with hypocritical guilt. She wanted him to talk, but wished he wouldn't. If they went on like this, she would end up finding more about Uzumaki Naruto than she was ready to. What if they flipped the coin? How much did Naruto know about her? Everyone had things they didn't bring up, but the two of them had decided that today was the time to do just that. "It's nothing compared to your stories," she told him. Naruto waited. She already knew he was a good listener. "My parents divorced not long after I was born. It wasn't anybody's fault, they just weren't right for each other. They would have separated earlier, but then they found out my mother was pregnant with me and they thought they would give it another try. For me. It didn't really work out, so when I was 3, they went their own ways. Dad and I moved here." Sakura absently scrubbed at the stickiness the ice cream had left between her fingers. "After a while, my mother met someone she liked and they saved up for a holiday. Mum wanted to stop on the way to the airport to see me before they left." She closed her eyes to gather her thoughts. Her father never minced his words and he never lied to her. At times, Sakura wished Kazuo hadn't so obligingly given her the right to know when she had asked. It was selfish, but it wasn't easy. "It was raining that day," Sakura heard herself say. "The story goes that they lost control of the car at a sharp turn on the highway and veered into a truck in the opposite lane. 3 other cars got involved in the crash. It was a big mess. Everyone got injured. They say it's a miracle there were only 2 casualties." She knew this because she had the newspaper cuttings folded and hidden in a shoebox in her closet. "They got taken to my dad's hospital. Dad was always busy back then and had to take me to work. So I was there too that night, playing with other kids in the pen. I didn't even know." She turned to Naruto then. He had been looking at her the entire time, and now Sakura understood what he had meant. It was weird seeing someone who looked more upset than you. It was also strangely assuring, comforting somehow. Naruto really wore his heart on his sleeve. In a slightly more lifted tone made possible by years of resignation, Sakura said, "I don't remember my mother that well. Dad says she loved me and I'm happy to believe that. But when I think about her, it's hard to grieve. It makes me sad, but it's not enough for me to understand what it's like to lose a parent." She smiled at Naruto. "That's why it was a stupid question. I asked even though I couldn't relate." Naruto gazed into her eyes. The shimmer of the setting sun passing through them illuminated some kind of regret that made Naruto shake his head. "You do," he corrected. "Relate, I mean." She raised an eyebrow. "Really? I don't see how." He grinned. Guilty for the wrong reasons. Sakura blinked. Then she laughed. Naruto did too. She leaned into his arm and they laughed so hard passerbys gave them weird looks. They were laughing for the wrong reasons, but at that moment, it was the only thing that felt right. It suddenly started pouring when Naruto and Sakura were minutes from home. Sakura began rummaging for her umbrella until Naruto grabbed her wrist. One look at his bright grin, and they were racing each other through the streets, shoes slapping against the wet pavement as they tried to jostle each other into lampposts. It looked like Naruto would be victorious, until they reached the gate. Just as he made to throw himself over it, Sakura leapt and vaulted over him. Surprised and caught off balance, Naruto yelped and tumbled ungracefully to the other side while Sakura landed elegantly. He spat mud from his mouth and groaned. Cheater. Laughing, Sakura flipped wet hair from her face and leaned over him. Sore loser. And that was how they were presented to Kazuo when they let themselves into the house, muddy, windblown and dripping wet. He paused with a fresh mug of coffee in his hand. Naruto noticed him first, his complaints trailing off. Sakura followed his gaze, expecting something much more frightful than her father, home early from work. Dad? She greeted, still breathless. Kazuo appraised her with amusement. It wasn't the first time Sakura had come home drenched. What was new was her flushed face and exhilarated glow. No one could miss the reason, not when it was standing next to her, slathered in mud. Kazuo nodded at them. Welcome home, you two. How bad is the rain? Heavy. It came from nowhere. Sakura made a face as she took off her shoes and her wet socks squelched unpleasantly. When did you come home? Just then. I got called in at 5, so they let me off early. Kazuo glanced at the water draining from the teenagers' bodies to pool at the floor. A shower might be a good idea. No kidding. Sakura agreed. She looked at Naruto, his front caked in dirt. You first. If you take too long and I get sick, I'll make sure you do too. Kazuo coughed pointedly. Sakura gave her father an innocent look. Yes, doctor? Naruto watched as Kazuo rolled his eyes at his daughter. He knew he was making a dirty mess on the floorboards. It was the only thing he was aware of. He didn't even know that he dropped to his knees in a deep bow until Sakura gaped at him. Naruto, what dash? I'm sorry, he blurted out. He dropped his forehead to the wet floor and spoke to the ground. I'm sorry, Naruto said again, squeezing his eyes shut. You two have helped me so much and given me more than you had to. And the only thing I've done is make you worry. They had done more than that. They had kept his room the way he'd left it for 2 months when they had hardly known each other for longer than that. But Sakura had unquestioningly held him together, as if just seeing him safe and intact was worth more than a trashed bedroom and long, silent weeks. Kazuo had given him a place where he should not belong. I'm sorry, Naruto repeated loudly. For several moments, the only sound was the rain outside. Then Sakura was kneeling beside him, her hand on his elbow. Naruto, get up first. No, stay there. Kazuo calmly sipped his coffee. Get the broom, Sakura. Sakura whirled around. Dad? Naruto's eyes widened. Then he lowered his head again. He was surprised that Kazuo would be so relentless, but punishment had always been more appealing than unconditional forgiveness to Naruto. Go on, he murmured to Sakura. Sakura looked uncertainly at her father and dubiously fetched a blue-handed broom from the kitchen. Then she stood to the side, looking as if she was ready to jump between the two men. Putting his coffee down on the counter, Kazuo took the broom. He flipped it deftly and tapped Naruto on the shoulder with the handle. Kid, after you mop up this mess, you'll clean up the entire house, you hear? Huh! Naruto's head began to come up, but Kazuo kept him down with the broomstick. Okay. Then you're going to wash the car, fix up the lawn and I'll come up with more later. Kazuo looked down at the blonde boy kneeling before him. Do all that and I might consider forgiving you for sleeping with my daughter. What? Ouch. Naruto's head had shot up so quickly his skull cracked into the broomstick. He gaped at Kazuo, then stared horrified at Sakura's mortified expression. Sakura dash. Her face flushed a deep scarlet. I'm taking a shower. Naruto reached out futilely. Sakura! Wait a minute! She was already gone, disappearing upstairs in a whirl. As her hair fluttered out of sight, the patient tapping of Kazuo's foot told Naruto he was on his own. Well? It wasn't like she was eavesdropping because she cared or anything, Sakura assured herself. In fact, she wouldn't even call it eavesdropping. She was just standing. It just so happened that they were also standing right below her, and talking in voices that were coincidentally loud enough to waft upwards towards her. Kazuo, listen, I didn't. The sheer mortification in Naruto's voice threatened to give Sakura away with her barely stifled snickers. Someone like him? Sleep with her? No wonder her father was picking on him. Not like Sakura enjoyed being labeled a victim, or getting implicated into the act of flirting with a roommate. Both of which Kazuo had insinuated in one fell swoop. He was really enjoying this. I can't hear you, boy. There was no way Sakura wouldn't be seen if she peeked, but it wasn't hard to imagine her father's expression. She knew her parent well. Kazuo was a brilliant actor. So many times he had guilt-tripped his daughter with crushing disappointment just to teach her a lesson, when he'd forgiven her the moment she threw her small arms around his neck, crying. A frustrated groan. We didn't sleep together. Well, that's what I saw you two doing on the floor. We were just sleeping. Sakura silently slapped a hand to her face. Someone really needed to think before they spoke. Wait, I mean Dash. Do you even care about her? What? Of course I care about Sakura. Then don't make her worry like that again. Sakura raised her head, her gaze growing distant as it fell on the opposite wall. The vague shadows cast on it were still, silent. She closed her eyes. You were worried too, Dad. I'm sorry, Naruto said softly, and Sakura could hear that he truly was. She'd felt it long before he apologized. Uzumaki Naruto was a sincere person, but sincerity didn't explain everything. Turning away, Sakura left the low murmuring voices behind. She didn't need to hear more, even though she wondered if Naruto would tell Kazuo anything he hadn't mentioned to her. She doubted it. To her, Naruto hadn't changed. He was still bright and cheerful, still reliable, still complex, hiding a weighty solemnity that belied his age. Sakura shook her head. She had to keep reminding herself that even if she gave herself a migraine thinking about it, there was nothing she could do to make the situation any less complicated. All that mattered was that Naruto was back, safe and alive. She could ignore everything else. For now. Sakura hadn't forgotten what had happened in the morning, there was no way she could. But in the midst of everything, minor details did elude her. That was why she didn't notice anything strange about the sight of her room intact and tidy, until she stepped inside and immediately tripped over her tennis racket. Usually, Sakura kept it hanging from the wardrobe door, but today someone had shoved it behind the door with the handle sticking out. Grimacing as she rubbed her ankle, Sakura leaned over to pick it up. She paused to blink when she saw that the racket was only part of a mound of her belongings crammed in the corner between the door and closet. Besides her racket, Sakura picked out one of her plush toys, a handbag and a semester-old biology quiz. When Sakura looked closely, she could see that the orderly state of her room was only a makeshift one. Her belongings were sitting in the wrong places and positions, the sheets on her desk hastily dropped in a scruffy pile. Sakura hooked her racket onto the wardrobe. It would probably take her longer to rearrange everything than it would have taken to clean up the mess herself. Still, he had tried, and it was enough to tug her lips into a small smile. Cleaning would have to wait. Right now, all Sakura wanted was to get out of her wet, heavy clothes. She gratefully changed into a set of dry pajamas and gathered her sopping uniform. Then, toweling her hair, she exited the room, and walked right into Naruto. Whoa, whoa, whoa! Swerving, he hastily twisted on one leg and flattened his back against the wall before they could smack into each other. Sakura's head came up, surprised. Naruto tugged at his muddy shirt, smiling sheepishly. Don't want to get you dirty. Sakura wrinkled her nose and playfully flicked her towel at him. Take a shower. You stink. Says the one who made me fall. Shush. I beat you fair and square. Sakura grabbed Naruto by the shoulders and steered him towards the bathroom. Now hurry up. I want a shower too. Naruto grinned cheekily. Let's shower Toge Dash. He broke off in a pained hiss as Sakura swiftly kicked him in the shin. She smiled sweetly. You were saying? Jay, just that, you should leave the cleaning up to me. Because I got the floor all dirty downstairs, yeah? Trust me, it's all yours. Sakura promised. Then, almost self-consciously, she tucked a lock of pink hair behind her ear. So, you talked to Dad? Naruto scratched his head. Kinda. Seeing Sakura's skeptical expression, he quickly added. He knows nothing happened though. I told him we were just, sleeping. He had been expecting a red-faced response from Sakura and had even guarded himself from sudden kicks or punches, so Naruto was surprised when she simply nodded absent-mindedly. She slowly dried her hair with the towel. Her eyes were on the toothpaste on the sink behind Naruto as she said softly. Just to prevent future misunderstandings, you shouldn't barge in like that again. Naruto opened his mouth, and then closed it. They had been speaking in code for long enough that he knew what she meant. He could only imagine what it had been like for Sakura, having him blast into her room like that. He had completely reshaped her ordinary life, just hers. The two of them could only turn to each other, and even then they were only semi-honest with themselves and each other. It wasn't easy. He opened his mouth, only to have Sakura's towel tossed over his head. "If you say I'm sorry one more time, I'm locking you out of the house," she warned. "Just take your shower and stop thinking, alright?" By the time Naruto managed to free his head, the bathroom door had already slammed in his face. He stared at the closed door for a moment, and then smiled to himself. "Hey, Sakura?" he called, because he knew she was still standing on the other side. "Thanks." She didn't answer. Maybe she had already said everything she needed to. At least, that was what Naruto thought. With his shirt pulled halfway over his head, he stopped at the sound of Sakura's voice, muffled and quiet. "Don't give up. Okay, Naruto?" For some reason, he burst out laughing. "What are you talking about? I never give dash." His voice died in an instant. His eyes widened. Sakura frowned, raising her head. "Naruto?" On the other side of the door, Naruto was staring disbelieving at his reflection in the mirror. That was right. He never gave up. Even now, it was the one thing he literally could not do. And yet, he'd somehow forgotten that. He had been stubbornly hanging on to his emotions simply because he felt he had to, not seeing that trying to see himself through this by avoiding it altogether wasn't like him. Suddenly, he felt like an idiot. Sakura had noticed this immediately, she'd even shouted it at him. But for some reason, the full impact of her words only hit him when she wasn't even trying. Naruto felt like smacking himself. "I'm so slow," he said aloud. Sakura blinked, eyebrow arched. Then she laughed. "Yes. Yes, you are." It was strangely comforting, lying awake in a dark, quiet house. For Naruto, who had lived on his own from the moment he was old enough to, the simple knowledge that two others were alive and breathing with him under the same roof was unbelievably soothing. Naruto shifted the positioning of his arms beneath his head. Midnight had come and gone hours ago. His eyes were red and tired, it had been a long day. But sleep was impossible. He was restless somehow, even though his mind was curiously blank. Eventually, Naruto came to the conclusion that his body wanted him to do something that his mind just could not figure out. Sometimes, Naruto was surprised that he was still sane and standing. There was something about being knocked down so many times. It wasn't fun realizing that he had spent all his life getting back up from one setback or another, sometimes several at a time. It meant that Naruto was good at putting the bad things behind him, but it didn't mean he forgot. It seemed worlds away, but he could still remember what Shikamaru had said to him. "You aren't the only one who screwed up, Naruto. You were gone for 4 years and in that time, we were the ones fighting. We couldn't defend our village. We can't fix that, alright?" Naruto wondered if his friend was beating himself up over what had happened. He hoped Hinata had told him he was sorry. Naruto frowned. Of course Hinata would tell him. It wasn't like she wouldn't have the chance to. Even if she did pick a fight with Kisame, and Naruto knew she would, she was weirdly stubborn like that. There was no way Hinata would go down without a fight. Not like she'll go down, he reminded himself. Hinata was strong. It was just Kisame. Kisame, the monster of the mist, with chakra reserves as large as a Jinchuriki's and who had easily fended off Konoha's attempts to have him eliminated. Naruto sucked in a breath and squeezed his eyes shut just as the terrible guilt rode over him. He had to come to terms with it sometime. He had led his friends into danger. No, he had led danger to them. "We can't fix that, alright?" Outside, a car horn cut sharply into the night. Naruto winced involuntarily. He always did, it reminded him of staring wide-eyed at certain death. A car shooting out from nowhere, a kunai in the gut, fire jutsu to the face, dying was just too easy. No one would believe Naruto if he admitted that he was afraid of death, but he was. He was terrified of dying with regrets. Naruto opened his eyes. Then he took a deep breath, closed them again and went under. The darkness came swiftly, followed by the eerie red glow and stench of rotting hatred and old blood. He was getting good at this. "Alright, QB. Let's talk."